Chapter 148. Sister Yunyang, what is the matter? You can tell me from here. After walking tens of miles away, Xianyuan Iren suddenly stopped. She coldly looked back at Li Yunyang, a cold intent spreading out. Or you don't have anything to report to me? Li Yunyang, who was behind him, was shocked and stopped as well. She looked closely at Iren, only to see that within her beautiful eyes were flames of rage. She couldn't help but sigh. Little Miss was smart and wasn't someone she could lie to. At the start, she might have been lied to, but if she thought about it, she would notice that something was wrong. She hesitated in her heart, seeing the coldness on Xianyuan Iren's face grow thicker and thicker. Li Yunyang felt a chill down her spine, totally dispelling any thoughts of lying. She slightly bent her knees. Little Miss, please forgive me. Before I followed you to Cloud Saint City, the mistress had instructed me. I definitely couldn't let Little Miss join in all the fights in Gantian Mountain City. Which was why I acted on my own. Is that so? Xianyuan Iren's brows rose up, and then she forcefully covered the sadness in her eyes, mocking herself. I really didn't expect you to be so loyal. However, you are a little too bold. You actually dare to play such little tricks and make decisions for me. Since you want to listen to my mother, then return to Xian Mountain City yourself. Iren doesn't need a loyal servant like you. Just as she was about to turn back, she saw Li Yunyang suddenly pull out her sword. She blocked the way. Xianyuan Iren was startled as she looked over in shock. Li Yunyang didn't dare to look her in the eye. She kept her eyebrows down, but her eyes were filled with determination. Miss Yunyang has always listened to you and never disobeyed your wishes. Today, Yunyang absolutely cannot let young Miss pass. Xianyuan Iren's pupils constricted, frowning as she looked in the direction of the carriage. Unfortunately, there was a mountain gap and she couldn't see the situation there. Thinking back to what Hu Qianqiu said before, her heart tightened. She didn't know whether or not Zhong Shou had returned. If he wasn't able to satisfy Hu Qianqiu, would this Gantian mountain elder really do what he said and take Zhong Shou's life? This person was a Xuanwu ancestor with 8 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm. How could he save Zhong Shou? Thinking of this, a light flashed in Xianyuan Iren's mind, and she looked at Li Yunyang. Yunyang, are you hiding something from me? You deliberately led me here. Is there something you don't want me to see? Li Yunyang's face suddenly changed and turned as white as a sheet of paper. The blade was 7 feet long and 1.5 feet wide. On the blade, there was a winged dream tiger roaring at the sky. Under the illumination of the fire, it was like a pool of autumn water, bringing out cold and beautiful arcs of light. Hu Qianqiu held his blade and stood 100 feet away from Zhong Shou, similarly pointing forward. His eyes lit up slightly. He didn't have any fighting spirit in his chest, but he felt his blood boiling. A feeling of extreme excitement, surprise and anticipation was suppressed at the bottom of his heart, unable to be released. His gaze retracted slightly, and when his breathing adjusted, his heart calmed down once more. Only then did Hu Qianqiu's hair flutter, the aura of a tiger suppressing all around. What a good combination of sword and intent, attack with all your might. During these 10 years, who knows how many times I have dreamed that one day you would be like today, asking me for advice on martial arts. However, I have never been able to do so. Today I can enjoy myself to the fullest. Let me see what you have learned in the 3 years you were in Linhai College. Zhong Shou's expression changed slightly, but he didn't say anything. A weird light flashed in his eyes, and in the next moment, his body went from extreme silence to extreme movement. His right leg stepped down, the energy in his body exploding like a nuclear bomb, surging into the meridians in his limbs and burning. His entire body whistled over like lightning, appearing and disappearing in everyone's field of vision. A sword stabbing out, shocking one's soul. Under the night sky, it was like a streak of light that could break through anything. In the next moment, they heard a sharp ding sound that shook all around. Hu Qianqiu casually waved his knife and slashed away the sword attack. He laughed out loud, filled with endless surprise and delight, giving out a tiger roar. Good. This sword is good, the sword attack is also good. He actually has 8 meridians, external pellet Xiantian. Yinyang, you're right. The Crown Prince didn't disappoint me, Hu Qianqiu. No, it's a surprise. A huge surprise. Tens of feet away, a soft putong sound spread out. Zhongling froze, allowing the pig leg in his hand to fall to the ground. There was oil beside his mouth, but he didn't bother to wipe it off. He only looked at the side of the bonfire, at the nimble and ghost-like body. Did he see wrongly? Was that person really his cousin Zhongshu? Didn't they say that he had dual meridians and couldn't cultivate? Just now, he had specially sensed him, but he didn't have any internal energy. How could he have 8 meridians? Not only Zhongling, but Huang Xiao and the others behind him were also stunned. Exchanging glances with one another, their eyes filled with loss. As for Hu Zhongyuan, who was in the carriage, his expression was extremely marvelous. Suddenly it was green and white, then suddenly it was red. Just now, when Zhongshu challenged him and merged with the sword, he felt something. However, only now was he able to confirm it. The prince really knew how to cultivate, and his cultivation wasn't low. 8 meridians. He remembered that the prince was only 13 now. At this moment, he really wanted to slap himself heavily. Only Zhong Yuan laughed out loud once more, like he was mocking everyone present for not being able to see. His eyes were shining brightly, not leaving the 2 people on the battlefield for even a moment. Where the sword light rose, Zhongshu's face was still really calm, but the blood in his body started to get excited, and his fighting spirit rose up. However, his heart still maintained a close to freezing coldness, merging with the sword. Today, he could go all out and fight. He didn't need to worry about gains and losses, and also didn't need to use spirit technique. He only needed to use the sword in his hand to fight to his heart's content. His body retreated slightly, and then he glided forwards once more. The sword light exploded out and instantly 10 sword shadows charged into the saber light, tearing apart the astral energy. This is the burning sword, where did you learn it from? Well used. Hu Qianqiu scoffed, slashing down with the wrong knife, directly blocking the 10 sword shadows. Zhongshu's sword shadow didn't dissipate just like that. Suddenly it became really weird and unpredictable, the sword path fleeting, piercing in from the most impossible direction, not holding back at all, directly stabbing at Hu Qianqiu's vital point. Hu Qianqiu exclaimed once more. This is a weird sword? Did you learn it from Ren Qianqiu or other people? Hey! Both in form and soul, but you are stronger than him, much stronger. That knife light still simply waved, resolving the danger. At his realm, he didn't need to change, and he could naturally use his strength to take down 10 people. No matter how exquisite the move was, he would be able to break it. Facing Zhongshu, even if he retracted 90% of his strength, he could easily block it. Earth Chakra 8 Meridian Xuanwu, pretty much the strongest below the Ascended Realm. Zhongshu didn't give up, the lightning-toothed sword in his hand once again waving out tens of sword shadows. This time, it was like a volcano erupting. Zhongshu's expression was like he was furious. It clanged and clanged as it struck the knife light, each sword heavier than the last, each sword crazier than the last. Hu Qianqiu didn't care, standing on the spot, not moving at all. He casually waved the 7-foot Tiger King knife in his hand, getting more and more excited, saying with interest, "This is the Rage Sword? This time it is a little weak. Your sword technique is 10 times better than that Yunxia Mountain's Rage Sword Yun Tao. However, you can't learn that fellow's fiery temper. When you fight with the sword, your heart is really calm. You can't get the essence of it." Between the 2 of them, knife light and sword shadows flashed. Pretty much 10 strikes in an instant, the knife shadows intersecting and changing, different at every moment. As for Hu Qianqiu's words in Hu Zhongyuan's ears, he didn't feel much. That Zhongling and Zhong Yuan's bodies shook. At that moment they were all shocked. Intense sword Wu Wei, mist sword Xie Jun, rage sword Yun Tao. Without exception, they were all people who had attacked Zhong Shou before. Hearing Hu Qianqiu's words, it was like they all had the essence of it, surpassing their master. In the next moment, Zhong Yuan's eyes opened wide, only to see that in Zhong Shou's hand, a purple lightning glow was shining. Under the activation of the lightning power, it was like he had cut off the air resistance, sword light intersecting. That was obviously his purple lightning spear. However, it was much faster and more perfect. Looking at it, the connection between the front and back seemed to have no flaws. In that instance, Zhong Yuan even had a misconception. Like the person who created this purple lightning spear wasn't him but Zhong Shou. As expected, Hu Qianqiu's voice was filled with shock. Isn't that Zhong Yuan's purple lightning spear, using the sword to use the spear, and it actually has the essence of it? Such a unique and ingenious way of thinking. If one sculpts it carefully, it can become a pinnacle technique. Prince, could it be that you have a good relationship with Zhong Yuan? Or was his spear technique taught by you? This fellow's learning isn't that good, again. Zhong Yuan was so furious that he nearly spat out blood. Hu Qianqiu let out a shocked exclamation. This is the blood-killing sword technique. 100,000 blood-killer Li Yaling? Zhong Yuan's heart shook as he focused once more. Instantly, he felt a blood stench surge over. Only to see Zhong Shou in the distance, his face cold and sharp. Each sword slashing out seemed to be filled with endless killing intent, simple and pure, but when the sword slashed out, it would take one's life. Hu Qianqiu's expression slowly turned serious. The knife in his hand wasn't casually waving around anymore. Each knife slashing out followed a mysterious path. It was perfect, blocking all of Zhong Shou's sword path. Where did the Crown Prince learn this set of swordsmanship? If I didn't know that the prince was in Linhai College, I wouldn't have any killing intent. I nearly thought that the prince was like Li Yaling, killing tens of thousands of people, killing your mother and wife. However, although the prince's sword techniques are good, they don't seem to belong to you. Seeing Hu Qianqiu shake his head, Zhong Shou smiled. From the moment he displayed that blazing sword, it was to prove what he had learned these few days. At this moment, it was time to be serious. The momentum of the sword suddenly changed again, without any warning. It was like a shadow, like an illusion. Chapter 149. When the sword light spread out, under the night sky, it was like a ball of sword mist covering Hu Qianqiu. Zhong Shou's entire person seemed to have turned into a ball of mist, moving along with the sword, making it hard to discern which was real and which was fake. In an instant, there seemed to be tens of Zhong Shou in everyone's field of vision, but they didn't know where he was. The sword energy was like a cloud and mist, passing through the knife images. This time, the Tiger King knife wasn't able to force him back, instead it was strangely lingering and extremely gentle. That sword's stance was soft and looked like it had no strength at all, but it was filled with strength. It didn't clash with the Tiger King knife, slowly swallowing and squeezing the space between the two of them. In a short 20-odd knife and sword exchanges, the 7-foot-long knife in Hu Qianqiu's hand had less and less space to move. Pretty much every sword stabbing out would strike at the key points of the protective energy around Hu Qianqiu, causing his energy to become chaotic and out of shape. Every place the sword pointed at was where he had to save, and he had to block it with his knife. As a result, the Tiger King knife was pretty much trapped around Hu Qianqiu's body, unable to be used. Hu Qianqiu only felt that the more he fought, the more he felt that something wasn't right. After restricting 90% of his strength, he still had 200,000 kilograms of strength. However, at this moment, even if he had several times more strength than Zhong Shou, he couldn't use it. His extremely overbearing fierce tiger energy was being stabbed and slashed, causing it to be broken into pieces. However, he didn't feel depressed, instead he felt more and more excited, the hot blood in his body slowly boiling. Originally, he only wanted to test out Zhongshu's strength, but now he couldn't help but feel his fighting spirit rise. This is Xiejun's Miss Sword? No, that fellow isn't as strong as you. I know, this is Lingyun Sek's cloud-shocking god-destroying sword. Where did you learn the secret technique of the soaring cloud sect from? You have already grasped the essence of it. Did I see it wrongly? Could it be that this is the Crown Prince's true ability? From rhythm to strength, using the sword's strength to display the true sword intent. When Hu Qianxiu said that, Hu Zhongyuan on the carriage was filled with emotions. His eyes flickered. The Lingyun Sek's cloud-shocking godly annihilating sword was rumored to be one of the top martial arts in the Donglin Cloud continent. It was said that after cultivating it, one would be able to ascend to the 9th meridian of the heavenly chakra realm and reach the spiritual grandmaster realm. In fact, in the ancient era, even immortal martial experts had been injured by this sword technique. Even in the Lingyun sect itself, there were only 3 to 5 direct disciples who could successfully cultivate it. There were less than 10 of them in the entire sect. However, this sentence was not as shocking as the following sentence. From the rhythm to the power, using the power of the sword to display the truth of the sword intent. In other words, didn't that mean that Zhongshu had actually already comprehended the sword insight of the cloud-shocking Godsbane sword, and had even attained an extremely profound level? Zongling's face alternated between green and white, only feeling that Hu Qianxiu's voice was ear-piercing. The 2 floating and changing figures in front of him were also incomparably dazzling, but he couldn't shift his eyes away. The light that erupted from the half-demon youth at this moment was too resplendent, so resplendent that it was difficult to bear. Good sword. What future ascended, what top genius outside of the hidden sects of the Donglin Cloud continent, that Zhongshu, compared to the prince, he's just trash. No, he isn't even trash. An outsider actually dares to scheme for the ruler's legacy. What is he? Hu Qianxiu laughed out loud. The 7-foot knife in his hand was like it was being entangled by dozens of iron wires, becoming more and more clumsy, more and more sluggish. However, the more it was like that, the more delighted he felt. He only felt that all the happiness in his entire life added up couldn't be compared to this moment. The son of his best friend who was seen as trash by everyone was a top swordsman with hidden strength. Gantian Mountain, which was in a precarious situation, had hope of reviving, so how could he not be happy? That Zhongshu needs to be at least 50 before he can ascend. However, I think the young master is at most 30, as expected from the descendant of the ruler, the son of the tiger father. However, although the prince's sword path is one with the spirit. However, this old man is also going to get serious now. Tiger roar, slash. That sluggish knife attack was originally trapped in a corner. However, at the most impossible moment it suddenly exploded out. A sharp knife light instantly swept in all directions. Almost all of the misty sword shadows were cut into pieces. He was like a dozing tiger that allowed a spider to weave a spider's web beside him. However, when it woke up, a casual claw would destroy it cleanly. It was really easy and didn't use any energy at all. Domineering aura. However, just as that knife light expanded to the maximum and was about to dissipate the last bit of cloud mist, a sword pierced over from behind Hu Qianxiu. There was no sign, no sound and no aura, appearing and disappearing at the same time. It was also sudden to the extreme. Like it had turned into a part of the moonlight, all the killing intent, all the aura was hidden. Hu Qianxiu didn't feel anything until that sword light was 3 feet away from him. Only then did his tiger eyes suddenly widen, revealing a look of shock. The knife light swiftly turned around, but he was only able to use the handle to block the cold tip of the sword. Then, a giant strength exploded out. Hu Qianxiu was caught off guard and wasn't able to use much strength to block. His body was immediately sent flying, sliding back a few feet. The two of them fought intensely for close to 15 minutes. This was the first time Hu Qianxiu's body moved. However, his eyes shone brightly. Apart from the fear in his heart, he was also excited. What a good hazy shadow sword! How exquisite! Just now I nearly fell to your sword. If you used it to assassinate, no one would be able to block it. If it was that brat Hu Zhongyuan, he would have most probably died from that sword. Hu Zhongyuan was speechless. He was already 40 years old, so how could he still call him a brat? However, if that sword was him, it would be hard to predict his life and death, with a 50-50 chance. This prince who didn't show off his skills was so strong that it made one terrified. He also felt a little ashamed, his eyes looking weirdly at Zhongling who was standing not far away. If it wasn't for this kid, he wouldn't have made a fool of himself just now. His father's words were not wrong. That Zhong sure might be an amazing talent in the eyes of others, but compared to this prince, he couldn't be compared at all. Zhong Shou stabbed out with his sword, but he was also forced back hundreds of feet by the recoil. The meridians in his body went berserk, true qi surging. He took tens of breaths to adjust and barely suppress it. Strong, really strong. If this Hu Qianxiu went all out, even if there were hundreds or thousands of Zhong Shou, he would be killed in one knife. At this moment, even if the opponent restricted 90% of his strength, he was still suppressing him. Not only strength, but his martial path was also really deep. However, the more it was like that, the more he was filled with fighting spirit. His sword was one that got stronger the stronger it met. Sword Emperor Tan Qiu didn't bully the weak. Only such a martial path expert could make him interested. Hu Qianxiu praised and kept his knife in satisfaction. I see that your dual meridian body hasn't been totally solved. At this moment you must have used up all your strength. Why don't we stop here? He thought that this battle could end just like that. Who knew that? Zhong Shou shook his head. No, I haven't had enough? Still haven't had enough? Your entire body must be feeling unbearable pain like your bones are being shattered. You still want to fight with me? Hu Qianxiu was shocked, but the praise in his eyes grew thicker. He was also interested. Are you saying that the sword technique just now wasn't your true ability? Uncle Hu, please give me some pointers. How is my Zhong Shou's sword? After we fight, Uncle Hu will know. Zhong Shou took in a deep breath once more, his expression unusually solemn. The hand that was holding the sword hung down and was held by the side of his body. So what if his bones were being shattered? Even if it was the pain of 10 million cuts, he wouldn't care. An opponent was hard to find. Even if he died in the next moment, he would fight to his heart's content. This was the heart of a swordsman. Hu Qianxiu's expression slowly turned serious. His intuition told him that the current Zhong Shou was totally different from before. A vague aura that made one feel respect spread out from Zhong Shou's body. For a moment, he was actually able to contend against him. After a few breaths of silence, Zhong Shou laughed. Shui, watch carefully. This sword is something that your young master can only use today. If you miss this chance, if you want to learn it, you will have to wait until I open the fourth meridian of the Earth Chakra. Chu Shui felt weird. What kind of sword technique could only be used today? Did he have to specially choose a day? However, she didn't dare to not listen to Zhong Shou's words. She stared with her watery eyes, not even daring to blink. In the next moment, a glow exploded in Zhong Shou's eyes as he charged 30 feet into the air and slashed out with his sword. Those who are good at attacking will be able to move the 9 heavens. Hearing Zhong Shou's words, Chu Shui's pupils dilated once more. This sword was extremely nimble, untraceable and eye-catching. It was filled with celestial energy like it flew from the heavens. Tens of miles away, Li Yunyang's expression was one of panic. She shook her head. Little miss, I don't know what you are talking about. Why would I hide anything from you? You are still lying to me. Xianyuan Iren's eyes were filled with disappointment. You said you were worried that I would interfere in Gantian mountain matters, but that Hu Qianxiu has the ability to break mountains. Even if I want to interfere, I can't. What is it that you don't want me to see? Seeing Li Yunyang keep silent and not reply, Xianyuan Iren shook her head slightly. Xianyuan Iren shook her head and directly walked forward, too lazy to ask any more questions. As for what it was, she would know once she went over. There was no need to waste time here. Li Yunyang stabbed out with her sword, trying to block Xianyuan Iren's path. However, in the next moment, her expression changed. She saw that Xianyuan Iren didn't dodge, her body directly smashing into the tip of her sword. She couldn't help but be shocked. Li Yunyang quickly retracted her sword, only to see the red body float past her. This place was really close to the carriage. The small hill beside it was only 300 feet high. Xianyuan Iren jumped up and reached the top of the small hill. Then, the situation below entered her eyes. Chapter 150. This place was really close to the carriage, the small hill beside it was just 300 feet high. Xianyuan Iren jumped up and reached the top of the small hill. Then, the situation below entered her eyes. Her almond-shaped eyes instantly constricted. She was startled and stood rooted to the spot. All of a sudden, she forgot how she should react. At this moment, what entered her field of vision was only the eye-catching sword in midair. That calm and confident person who was as elegant as a celestial. The sword's shadow was only 3 feet, the sword energy was only 7 feet. However, when the sword slashed down, it seemed to fill up heaven and earth. It was ethereal and nimble, its trajectory indiscernible. A few words flashed across Xianyuan Iren's mind. At this moment, only these 2 words could describe what she was feeling. This sword strike was marvelous beyond compare. It was really stunning. This is Zhongshou? How is that possible? Isn't he a dual meridian body and doesn't have internal energy? How could he use such a sword? Such a sword technique, even in the Pill Fountain sect, those top talented senior brothers, she had never seen them use it. Even the seniors of the sect didn't have such a level of spirituality. Her eyes were filled with shock as she muttered to herself in disbelief. Li Yunyang followed closely behind and jumped onto the small hill. He glanced down with a complicated expression on his face. Little miss, that day the prince said that he killed deceitful sword Ren Qianqiu and 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling. Those words are actually true. Li Yaling really died in his hand. He killed deceitful sword Ren Qianqiu in less than 3 breaths. Xianyuan Iren's body shook once more. All of a sudden, her mind was in chaos, totally blank. Only a broken memory surged out from the depths of her mind. I, Zhongshou, am an indomitable spirit. Why would I need a girl to protect me? Yesterday in the back courtyard, you should have sensed it. In Miss Xuanyuan's opinion, how many people below the martial ancestor realm are my opponents? Who else can it be? Apart from me, who else here can kill them? Miss, if one day you discover that Crown Prince Zhongshou isn't a cripple like everyone thinks, but a young genius who is even stronger than the 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling, you'll know that he's a genius. To him, those people who wanted to kill him were like ants and weeds, jumping clowns. They were not worth mentioning. Miss, what will you do? Short sentences kept appearing in his mind. Xianyuan Iren couldn't help but bite down on her lower lip. It was true, those words were actually true. Her nails dug into her flesh. It was very painful. His lower lip was also hurting and bleeding. She was really in reality. Li Yaling was really killed by Zhongshou, and the person in front of her, who had used a sword that looked like a flying immortal, was really Zhongshou. That unreal feeling of being in a trance immediately disappeared. In her impression, the youth who couldn't cultivate but was determined, kind, and a little wasteful. In an instant, he merged with the figure in front of her who could make all the geniuses in Donglin Cloud Continent feel ashamed. There was no difference at all. In Xianyuan Iren's chest, an indescribable feeling rose up. Was it joy? Was it happiness? Was it sadness? Was it excitement? Was it embarrassment? Was it shame? Xianyuan Iren was unable to differentiate, only feeling all sorts of emotions, complicated. Hu Qianqiu squinted, raising his head and looking into the sky. His gaze was also lost, but he was captivated by that sword image, filled with surprise and praise. His eyes were also filled with seriousness for the first time. What a good attacking person, able to move the 9 heavens! This sword is truly untraceable. Amazing! With his Xuanwu ancestor realm, he didn't dare to take it head-on, instantly retreating 100 feet. Only when Zhong Shou's sword attack weakened did he move forwards, waving his knife and slashing down. The knife and sword intersected, but they didn't collide, brushing past one another. The tens of strikes were like that, continuously and dangerously intersecting. It was like under the moonlight, 2 people dancing with their own knives and swords, totally unrelated to one another. However, looking at the knife and sword attacks, there was only a slight deviation, and his head would be sliced in half. Zhong Shou's eyes didn't even blink. Hu Qianqiu was even more excited, his face flushed red, like he was enjoying it and enjoying it. In the eyes of the people around, it was a different feeling. Hu Qianqiu's knife was wide open, simple and clean, extremely overbearing. Zhong Shou's sword seemed to be even more exquisite. The sword light was illusionary, stabbing over from the most unbelievable angles, making one unable to grasp it. However, it didn't have the weird aura of that deceitful sword. It was extremely nimble, floating and changing with ease. It was like each sword contained the essence of the sword path, sword rhythm, sword strength, sword intent, all of it was complete. Just as he was engrossed in it, he suddenly felt that not far away from him, there was a similar aura that suddenly charged up. Everyone looked over in shock, only to see that Chu Shui was looking at Zhong Shou's sword in delight, her brows dancing. The aura on her body was also appearing and disappearing, it was also extremely nimble, like it was about to fly. These people were all really smart people, and with just a thought they understood the meaning of Zhong Shou's words. Those who were good at attacking would be able to move the 9 heavens. The sword intent of that sword was most probably suitable for this girl, and it had the meaning of giving her pointers. Zhong Yuan couldn't help but feel jealous in his heart. Not breaking through to Xiantian and being able to comprehend the aura of the martial path, who knows what level this girl would reach in the future. Anyways, she would be stronger than him. He didn't dare to be distracted for too long, muttering to himself as he focused on the intense battle. That place was filled with wind, knife energy shooting all around, sword energy sweeping all around, extinguishing the bonfire. However, at this moment the sky was slowly turning bright. Rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds and shone down from the east, causing the knife light to become more and more eye-catching. Just as the aura of the knife and sword swelled to the extreme, becoming more and more exciting, Hu Qianqiu sighed regretfully once more. The prince's true energy is in a mess. How about we use this move to decide the victor? Okay. The vital energy in Zhong Shou's chest and abdomen surged. He was unable to speak, so he simply agreed. Then, that sword light suddenly exploded out, lightning flashing, thousands of blade shadows sweeping over. This time, it was a different style, totally unafraid of clashing with Hu Qianqiu's 7-foot Tiger King knife. All of the power was concentrated and condensed again and again, then condensed again and again. Then, when the knife and sword clashed, it suddenly exploded out. As for the saber shadows and sword lights, they became several times faster in an instant. It was so fast that it exceeded the limits of everyone's vision, making it hard for them to see. However, Zhong Shou's sword was like a flower. When it bloomed to its brightest, it started to fade. Ding! A deafening ring as Zhong Shou's body flew backwards. He seemed to have lost all his strength, unable to support himself. He shook and swayed, only using his sword to support himself from falling. Fresh blood seeped out from the corner of his lips. However, there was no pain in his eyes. Instead, it was filled with satisfaction after going all out. As for Hu Qianqiu, he stood solemnly with his knife. He seemed to be stunned as he stared at the sleeve of his right hand. Just as everyone didn't know what was going on, they saw a piece of cloth slowly fall off and land on the ground. All of a sudden, the area around the two carriages was dead silent. Everyone was silent at that moment, like they had lost the ability to speak. Only after tens of breaths did Hu Qianqiu laugh out maniacally, filled with joy and excitement. Lost, what a good loss! Today's battle was so satisfying, so satisfying. So I, Hu Qianqiu, underestimated the prince. Is this your sword? Unparalleled. 10 years later, no, in just 7 years, your sword will be invincible. When he said that, Hu Qianqiu swept out with his knife. That knife was really sudden. Everyone was just able to blink their eyes when that 1,000-foot-long vast knife energy was already beside Zhongling. It pretty much brushed past Zhongling's body and swept behind him, smashing Feng Shao, who was retreating, as well as those few Xiantian experts. Blood and meat splattered, numerous blood droplets splattering everywhere. Instantly, half of Zhongling's body was dyed red. He didn't move at all. However, he did not move at all. His eyes had lost focus as he stared blankly into the distance. He did not even dare to wipe his eyes. You are really quick to react. However, in front of me, you still want to escape? Who asked you to be arrogant in front of me? If you have the ability, then be arrogant for me to see. Hu Zhongyuan's eyelids twitched, but he didn't say anything to persuade him. Since 3 months ago, his old man had been suppressing his anger for a long time. He had also suppressed it numerous times in Gantian Mountain. At this moment, he knew that he didn't need to suppress it anymore, exploding out. Naturally, it couldn't be stopped, and he could use all sorts of methods. Their Iron Tiger race needed to use the heads of these few people to show their stance in front of the prince. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame that Zhongling was unlucky. At this moment, Hu Qianqiu was like a human-shaped typhoon, and even he didn't dare to offend him. Speaking of which, this Zhongling really made one hate him. He didn't have any real ability, so why did he act like a big shot? Like their prince, his sword skills were high, unparalleled in the world, but he knew how to be low profile. However, wasn't he a little too low profile? Just as he was thinking about that, Hu Zhongyuan saw a cold gaze sweep over. It was Hu Qianqiu. His heart couldn't help but jump, and his mood instantly sunk to the bottom. He knew his father's methods the best. He was extremely violent, and he wouldn't be able to avoid a painful beating. Zhongyuan laid on the ground, revealing a teasing expression. He knew that the situation would be like this. That Zhongling was most probably crying in his heart. Who was the dumb one out of all these people? However, in his heart, he didn't have any intention of gloating. He didn't have the heart to think about the martial path that he comprehended just now. When that Zhong Shou had the time, he would probably be dead, right? Xianyuan Iren stood on the mountain peak in a daze, her jade-like hands tightly clenched. He won. He was actually able to beat Hu Qianqiu by half a move. Even if the latter had restricted most of his true qi, and didn't have the strength of a martial ancestor to fight with Zhong Shou, his martial path attainments couldn't be faked. Chapter 151. Early in the morning, the bright sunlight chased away the last bit of coldness in this desolate land. Zhong Shou was really calm, sitting on the roof of the carriage, opposite Hu Qianqiu. Xianyuan Iren was at the side, personally pouring wine for the two of them. Girls in ancient times paid attention to being on the same level. The current Xianyuan Iren didn't have any of the sharpness she usually had. Her expression was calm and solemn as she knelt down, her actions gentle and soft, looking really good for the occasion. Each action was extremely elegant, perfectly displaying the charm of a woman. Beside her sat Hu Zhongyuan. However, Zhong Shou's gaze automatically ignored him. In truth, he didn't dare to look. This Iron Tiger race leader's face was swollen and bruised, looking really unsightly. The scene of how Hu Qianqiu taught his son a lesson was still fresh in his mind. Holding that 7-foot-long Tiger King knife, he didn't care about the situation and just gave him a good beating. The words he scolded out were something he couldn't forget till now. "What brat, what do you think I'm old and dumb? What do you think I'm trying to get on the good side of Zhongling? Aren't you embarrassed, etc." Whatever he said, even Zhong Shou found it ear-piercing and couldn't sit still. At this moment, Zhong Shou couldn't bear to agitate this fellow. On the contrary, this Hu Zhongyuan didn't seem to care at all, his face swollen and bruised as he laughed. Hu Qianqiu looked at him in disgust, scoffing, not bothering at all. He smiled and looked at Zhong Shou with kindness, like Zhong Shou was his own kid. "How is the crown prince's injury?" Zhong Shou stretched his muscles and bones, his entire body giving out a series of popping sounds like soybeans being fried. Following which he smiled. "It's fine now, thank you Uncle Hu for showing mercy." Hu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He knew what was going on, which was why he didn't ask. He knew that Zhong Shou's meridians were not in harmony after a long battle. He had been controlling his strength so that he wouldn't really hurt Zhong Shou. Don't be fooled by the fact that he spat out blood just now. In fact, it was just the impact of the counterattack. He didn't suffer any real injuries. He only needed to adjust his breathing after the battle. Once again staring at Zhong Shou and sizing him up, the smile on Hu Qianqiu's face slowly faded. His expression turned serious as he raised the wine cup. "This first cup is to the ruler's spirit in heaven." Zhong Shou was taken aback. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this time, his cheap father was still alive. In just a few years, he would return from the Oblivion Cloud Sea and display his might. First, he personally wiped out the Zhong family and hung Zhong Shi's head on the flagpole of Gantian Mountain for 3 months. After that, he took his anger out on the Soaring Cloud sect for not keeping their promise. He went to the Dan Spirit Mountain alone and started a massacre, killing 13 heaven-rank powerhouses before leaving. Even when several sect elders worked together, they weren't able to make him stay. It caused the top sect in Donglin Cloud Continent to nearly be unable to protect their own shrine. Of course, that was because of his death. Whether or not this era would still be the same, he didn't know. Anyways, he was a little worried about this expert. Every time he did something, he had to worry about many things. Even if he placed those few ownerless treasures, he didn't dare to easily take them. He also didn't dare to leave the sight of Yin Yang and Chu Shui. Although he was thinking about that in his heart, Zhong Shou's face also turned serious. He solemnly raised the cup, spilling the wine to the side. Hu Qianqiu sighed slightly, raising the second cup. However, he didn't drink it. Instead, he looked towards Zhong Shou with a questioning gaze. "I am really curious. Within Gantian Mountain, Left Pillar General Chiu Wei and I aren't biased. Our positions are uncertain. Why did the Crown Prince invite me instead of Lord Chiu?" Samuraim's eyes squinted, calmly and elegantly taking in a deep breath. "I heard Yin Yang mention that Chiu Wei is the most loyal to my father. He is also the only one who doesn't care about anything and supports me, Zhong Shou, to take over the position of Monster King. Uncle Hu is more serious and looks at the big picture." He didn't lean towards a side because he wanted to keep the 3 of Gantian Mountain in check? Hu Qianqiu laughed out loud, filled with gratification. "The prince is really smart. As expected of Jun Shang's child. Your Heavenly Fox clan is indeed innately intelligent. However, you are a little too smart. My brother Weiran really hid it from me. The prince is obviously a top talent, unparalleled in Donglin. However, he wasn't willing to tell us brothers. These few days my heart is in a mess. Hu Zhongyuan nodded his head in agreement, feeling a little annoyed. Zhong Shou only felt helpless. Before Zhong Weiran disappeared, he really didn't have any internal energy. However, at this time, there was no need to explain. Following which Hu Qianqiu's expression changed, deep in thought, thinking about it, there really is a need to hide it. Although your Sky Fox 8-tail king race can't shake the foundations of Argantian Mountain, recently it has been problematic. These fellows abandoned us and left the cloud world to avoid being hunted down by the human race. Today they are actually so thick-skinned to want to return. If they knew about the prince's situation early on, it wouldn't be good. They would be able to do such despicable things like poisoning and assassinating. Also, regarding the prince's mother race, the ruler does have his own difficulties. Zhong Shou's hand that was holding the wine cup couldn't help but tremble slightly. His eyes opened wide, his mouth unable to close. So he really had a reason to hide his strength and hide his pearls? Sky Fox King race? This wasn't the same as the 7-tail Zhong family. The 8-tail Sky Fox King race Shui family was really famous during the God Emperor era. Their strength was no weaker than that of shrines and sections. Zhong Shoxin had a slight thought, totally dispelling the thought of laughing and ruling over Donglin and testing the world with his sword. It seems like it was better to be low profile. After drinking the second cup, Hu Qianqiu casually tossed the wine cup aside, taking out 2 bowls and plates from the servant behind him and placing them between the two of them. Xianyuan Iren's expression changed slightly before she calmed down, her hand holding the wine bottle as she solemnly filled it to the brim. Hu Qianqiu didn't bother, his eyes shining brightly. In the past, I was worried that you wouldn't be able to control Gantian Mountain, causing the millions of monster race people in our mountain city to collapse after 10 years of hard work. Now that there is no such worry, naturally there is no reason to work for others. I wonder what instructions the Crown Prince has for Yin Yang to summon me here? Today, with just one sentence, I will accompany the prince to kill my way back to Gantian Mountain. Chop off Zhong Shi's head and give it to the prince to use as a wine pot. Zhong Shou's lips curled up, his expression once again regaining calmness. Uncle Hu, there is no need to rush the Monster King position. In these 3 to 5 months, I want to spend some time outside to find a place to cultivate. Seeing Hu Qianqiu's brows furrow like he was about to speak, Zhong Shou smiled and waved his hand, telling him to calm down. Now that Yunxia Mountain is forcing their way in, if I go back to continue being the Monster King, it will only spoil things. He was also unwilling to put on an act and be their puppet to be bullied. Moreover, that Zhong family has stretched their hands too far these few years. It is not convenient for me to attack my own race, so I will have to trouble Uncle Hu and the left pillar. There is no need to go too far, just let them be more well-behaved. Hu Qianqiu's eyes protruded out, following which he laughed out loud. My eyes are really blind. Very good. The prince has the intelligence of the ruler but not the indecisiveness of the ruler. That Zhong family has been so arrogant these few years, but the ruler has always tolerated them. I, Hu Qianqiu, have long found them an eyesore. Leave this matter to me. Don't worry, Prince, when you return to Gantian Mountain, I will make sure that the entire mountain city will no longer have that foul atmosphere. Hu Zhongyuan's expression changed, his brows furrowing as he made a face. Did his father have the right to say those words? This prince's words were obviously filled with bad intentions, destined to greatly offend the Monster King race. Hu Qianqiu didn't bother about him, his tiger eyes squinting. However, Prince, you trust me so much? Aren't you afraid that I will do something? I trust Uncle Hu, but not all of it. Zhong Shou waved his sleeves and pointed to the side. So my 2 servants. I need Uncle Hu to bring them back too. With Uncle Hu and Head Chiu working together, the 2 of them will be able to take up important positions. Where he pointed was Yin Yang and Lian Fan, who were unwilling to leave. He thought to himself that he didn't have the mood to spend all day in Gantian Mountain managing administrative matters. Wouldn't it be best if he raised up his few trusted subordinates and didn't care about anything? Hu Qianqiu's eyes lit up once more, his praise getting thicker. He wasn't biased, Even if they were close friends, he didn't lack defensive methods. His martial strength was high. He didn't lack schemes and was vicious. Wasn't such a person a good candidate for the Monster King? What he didn't know was that Zhong Shou was thinking about slacking off, planning ahead for his beautiful and leisurely life in the future. Hu Qianqiu only felt more and more satisfied, laughing out loud. He took that Tiger King knife in his hand once more. Slashing with the knife, ocean amounts of fresh red blood spurted out. When the wine in the plate was dyed red, Hu Qianqiu looked over in anticipation. Zhong Shou's lips twitched. Was this Yamo going to bleed again? Oh right, the monster race had a blood alliance. Once they made an oath, they wouldn't betray. However, once a new Monster King ascended, they would need to make a new blood alliance. Speaking of which, Yin Yang once said that their Gantian Mountain had a total of 147 races. With so many blood alliances made, one could foresee that the day of his anemia wasn't far away. He wanted to learn from Lei Dong that day and only force out a few drops of blood. However, looking at Hu Qianqiu's pure and expectant gaze, as well as the shocking wound on his wrist, he didn't think too highly of himself. Thinking about it, it was still too disrespectful. He could only grit his teeth and close his eyes as he slit his wrist. However, it was just a few centimeters, only cutting open the flesh and causing tens of drops of blood to drip out. Even if he managed to deal with it, at this moment, be it Hu Qianqiu or Xianyuan Iran and Hu Zhongyuan at the sides, they all had solemn expressions. The people nearby all knelt down towards Zhong Shou. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn and sacred. Hu Qianqiu half knelt on the ground, solemnly carrying one of the plates in front of Zhong Shou. Only when Zhong Shou also received it solemnly did Hu Qianqiu raise his plate up high. Today I, Hu Qianqiu, swear a blood alliance. My Gantian Mountain Iron Tiger race is willing to treat the prince as the king. Chapter 152. Drinking the blood wine in one gulp, Hu Qianqiu heavily smashed the plate in his hand, saying viciously, "If I go against my oath, call my Iron Tiger race such a plate." Hu Qianqiu used a lot of strength, but the quality of the plate was really good. With a puff sound, it heavily shot into the soil and disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a bottomless pit. However, whether it was broken or not, Zhong Shou didn't know and was too embarrassed to dig it out. After forming the blood alliance, Hu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked nearby at Zhongling and Zhongyuan, who were tightly tied up. How is the prince going to deal with these two people? Although this Zhongling and Zhongyuan are the cousin of the prince. However, in my opinion, the prince should be more vicious. There is no point in leaving these two wolf cubs, why not kill them? Zhongling's face was numb. The expression in his eyes was one of total despair. That Zhongyuan scoffed and didn't say anything. His expression was normal. Even if he knew that he was going to die in the next moment, his heart wouldn't waver. Zhong Shou broke out into a laugh. "Uncle Hu, our Sky Fox race all have special abilities. It was said that once one's martial arts and spiritual cultivation reach a certain realm, close relatives all have telepathy, right? This Zhongling's father has already passed, but his mother seems to be a return to Sun Realm Spirit Master? You just need to find a place to lock up this Zhongling. It isn't time to deal with this person yet." Hu Qianqiu's brows furrowed. After thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel annoyed and unwilling. Following which he looked over in anticipation. Zhong Shoxin knew what he meant, but decisively shook his head. His cultivation was not bad and he could barely sense if someone was dead. He also knew that Zhong Weiran was still alive and well, staying in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. However, he couldn't say such words carelessly. He didn't want to wait for Zhong Weiran to come out and chop him up like a monster. Just as he was thinking about that, his heart couldn't help but jump intensely with a thud. Hu Qianxiu was slightly disappointed, turning around and saying, "Then what about this Zhong Yuan?" This person's entire family was almost wiped out. Zhong Shou regained his senses and smiled innocently. "Uncle Hu, I'm sorry. I want to keep this person alive. My Zhong clan doesn't have many talents, and I only have a single descendant left. It would be a pity to kill him just like that. My royal father would definitely blame me. That's why I decided to keep this guy and train him well. This can't be killed, that can't be killed, the prince is so boring." Hu Qianxiu snorted heavily, extremely depressed. However, he still patiently reminded, Zhong Yuan's temperament is indeed not bad. There are so many people in the Heavenly Fox Zone clan, but he's the only one who's slightly pleasing to the eye. He has the demeanor of the Lord when he was young. However, this fellow had already been nurtured and would not easily betray its master. You have to be careful. Zhong Shou nodded his head, expressing that he knew what to do. Only then did Hu Qianxiu stand up. Recently, the situation in the mountain city is a little off. I can't stay here for long. Hu Qianxiu will go back now and help the prince take care of Gantian Mountain. However, the prince is alone outside and Hu Qianxiu is a little worried. I will let my son Zhong Yuan accompany you outside. As for your 2 servants, I will bring them along with me. If the prince has anything to instruct them, please be quick and don't waste time. Also my granddaughter." Taking a deep look at Chu Shui who was hiding at the side, Hu Qianxiu sighed slightly. "I'll have to trouble the prince to take care of her too." Seeing Hu Qianxiu finish, he jumped off the carriage and rode on a huge windrider foal to wait in the distance. Hu Zhongyuan giggled and walked to the side, grabbing Zhongling whose face had recovered some color and giving her a good beating. Just now, he was beaten up badly by his father. However, he didn't dare to blame Hu Qianxiu and Zhong Shou. Naturally, he had to find someone to vent his anger on. This Zhongling caused him to lose face, so naturally he couldn't let her go. As for the matter of his father arranging her beside the prince, he didn't care at all. Zhong Shou silently praised him. This Iron Tiger race leader looked rough and straightforward, but he was meticulous and knew how to read the situation. However, he didn't expect that Hu Qianxiu was actually Chu Shui's grandfather. No wonder Chu Shui's situation just now was a little off. He reached out and waved to Yin Yang and Lian Fan. The 2 of them understood and walked to the side of the carriage. Zhong Shou first looked at Lian Fan, passing over a green cloth filled with words. "Lian Fan, your talent is only above average and won't be able to learn any profound martial path. I also don't have much to teach you. However, you are calm, hard-working and resilient. I have a mountain piling technique that is suitable for people like you. As long as you train hard every day, you will be able to pile up into a mountain. Even if you can't compare to those geniuses, you can become an ascended ancestor." With Lian Fan's personality, he wasn't shocked by honor or disgrace. When he heard the first few words, he wasn't disappointed. Zhong Shou's later words also didn't show any joy. His eyes were filled with gratitude as he solemnly took the silk cloth from Lin Fan. Zhong Shou smiled as he looked at Yin Yang. "Uncle Yin's talent is outstanding and you come from a famous sect. That heaven-burning absolute flame saber isn't any weaker than the Lingyun sect's cloud-shocking god-destroying sword. I can't give Uncle Yin much, I can only help you comprehend the mysteries of intent." When he said that, Zhong Shou casually waved his hand, and a tree branch not far away flew into his hand. Then, a ball of flame suddenly lit up in his palm. It wasn't extinguished, but it wasn't blazing, just burning like that. In just a moment, the tree branch was burned into charcoal. He passed it to Yin Yang. "Uncle Yin, take this thing. In the future, you might be able to comprehend it. I'll leave Gantian Mountain to the two of you. Yin Yang's brows furrowed, taking the item in his hand like it was a treasure. Looking at it now, it was similar to the charcoal, there was nothing special about it. However, he could feel that if his martial path was blocked, maybe this charcoal would be the key to helping him break through. Silently keeping it, Yin Yang bowed heavily towards Zhongshou. He didn't say anything, but his actions showed his intentions. Zhongshou casually said a few more words, until Hu Qianqiu got impatient and shouted loudly. Only then did he let the two of them leave. When Yin Yang and Lian Fan got on their horses, Hu Qianqiu cupped his fists behind him, laughing out loud. 5 months later, Hu Qianqiu will wait for the prince to return to the mountain and take over the throne. The prince's sword path is one with the spirit, suppressing the cloud world. I only hope that in my life, I can see the prince sweep Donglin and rule Cloud Continent. His voice reverberated in all directions. Then, he left first. A group of people rode on tens of windrider foals, majestically leaving, bringing with it a trail of dust. Not long later they disappeared without a trace. Sweep through Donglin and dominate the Cloud Continent? It wasn't just one person who said that to him. Zhongshou laughed, not agreeing or disagreeing, casually stretching the wine cup to the side. When Xianyuan Iren saw that, she couldn't help but stare viciously at him, but she still obediently filled his cup. Only when Zhongshou finished it in one gulp did Xianyuan Iren bite her lips. Prince, have you been looking at me as a joke these few days? With your ability, 10 Xianyuan Iren wouldn't be your opponent, right? I actually dared to say that I would protect you, isn't that amusing? How is that possible? Speaking of which, Zhongshou was really confident. Zhongshou, didn't hide it from you, but you didn't believe me. What did you say, to still be in the mood to joke? Xianyuan Iren couldn't help but grind her teeth, scoffing softly. She took out a clean cloth and helped Zhongshou wrap up the wound on his hand. Her actions were gentle and careful, causing Zhongshou to be slightly stunned. His voice also became gentle. It's my fault, I shouldn't have not believed you. However, in your eyes, you don't care about me? Am I not worthy for you to explain to me? Her voice was like a silver bell, soft and really nice to listen to, making one feel numb. When Zhongshou heard that, his bones softened by half, and his scalp felt numb. His personality was one that was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Speaking of which, he wasn't in the right either. However, his feelings at that time were really complicated, and he did want to shake this girl off. Slightly awkward, Zhongshou coughed. I forgot. He originally wanted to say something nice, saying that he was afraid that after she knew, she would leave without worry. He couldn't bear to. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't appropriate. Rather than using thousands of words to explain, why not just say a simple sentence? Anyways, he didn't know how to flirt. Although he loved to chat with girls, talk about life and dreams, most of the time, he made the girl so angry that she ran away. Xianyuan Iren's eyes couldn't help but turn red, but she was a straightforward girl, not showing any signs of being wronged. She tucked her hair behind her ear and said expressionlessly, If the prince doesn't like me, you can cancel the marriage. Xianyuan Iren wouldn't bother him anymore. The prince's sword path is one with the spirit, and your future is huge. You will definitely be able to find someone worthy of you, someone who can make you like. The more Zhongshou heard, the more he felt that something wasn't right, his teeth turning sour. He thought to himself that if he cancelled the marriage, he would be branded as someone who abandoned her. He couldn't help but facepalm, feeling a headache. He waved his hand. What nonsense are you thinking about? When did I say that I wanted to cancel the marriage? Just as he was about to change the topic, he heard Xianyuan Iren make an "oh" sound, her beautiful eyes looking over. Since you aren't canceling the marriage, then when will the prince come to Xian Mountain City to meet my father? Zhongshou was startled. Why did the topic change to this again? Thinking about it, the situation didn't seem right. He took a peek at the side, only to see a cunning look flash across Xianyuan Iren's eyes. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh, following which he had an idea, acting like he was hesitating. That's not good, right? I heard that your mother doesn't like me, and the Xianyuan city lord is also against it. There's also Pill Fountain sect and Mysterious Cloud Spirit sect, which are problematic. Iren, why don't we elope? Let's follow what you said and leave Donglin Cloud Continent together. Won't we be free? Xianyuan Iren instantly frowned. How can we do that? If we leave Donglin Cloud Continent, we can avoid many problems, but where will my parents be? As a child, how can I go against my parents? As they say, with parents around, one shouldn't travel far. Zhong Shou looked over with a smile that wasn't a smile. His eyes were filled with a questioning look. Xianyuan Iren's face instantly flushed red, explaining, "At that time I didn't think about leaving Donglin for too long, I just wanted to leave with you for a period of time. In the future, I just needed to lie and say that what's done is done, and my parents and master wouldn't agree." Chapter 153. Zhong Shou looked over with a smile that wasn't a smile. His eyes were filled with a questioning look. Xianyuan Iren's face instantly flushed red as she explained, "At that time I didn't think about leaving Donglin for too long, I just wanted to leave with you for a period of time. In the future, I just needed to lie and say that the rice is already cooked and my parents and master would agree. However, that was just a temporary measure. At that time I really thought that you were in danger. But now you have opened 8 meridians and your sword skills are high. Naturally, you have to walk the righteous path. How can you do that?" Halfway through her words, Xianyuan Iren suddenly felt that something wasn't right. Zhong Shou's eyes opened wide in shock, clapping his hands and saying in admiration, "What rice is cooked? So that was the case, there was actually such a move. TSK. This method is not bad." Xianyuan Iren's face flushed red, unable to maintain her ladylike demeanor. She stood up and used the wine flask to hit Zhong Shou heavily before jumping off the carriage. Looking at the weird gazes of Hu Zhongyuan and Li Yunyang, she felt that she had no face to face them. Just as she was about to return to the carriage, she heard Zhong Shou laugh. 5 months later, before returning to Gantian Mountain, I will make a trip to Xian Mountain City. To meet my father-in-law. Xianyuan Iren turned her head in shock, only to see that although Zhong Shou was smiling, he was really serious. The gaze he looked over with was sincere and passionate, warming her heart. "I will follow what you said. I, Zhong Shou, will officially settle our marriage." Xianyuan Iren only felt that her heart was lightly struck. Suddenly it felt soft and numb, her heart filled with joy. It wasn't happiness, but it was a surprise. She couldn't help but squint and take a close look at Zhong Shou. She thought to herself, "What kind of person is this fiancé of mine?" Even after spending tens of days together, she was unable to see it clearly, only feeling that her impression of him was really blurry. Kind nature? Extravagant? Lazy temperament? Deep thoughts? Smart and shrewd? Vicious and merciless? All kinds of feelings were mixed together, making it impossible for him to distinguish them. That's right, he was also extremely lecherous. However, his mother had said that it was very difficult to see through a person completely. She only needed to know that her future husband was responsible and that she didn't hate him. That was enough. The only thing she could be sure of was that Zhong Shou's swordsmanship was extremely high. His talent was so high that it was one of a kind in the world. Very few people could compare to him. His parents were always worried that he would not be able to cultivate and would not be able to protect him in the future. If they knew what had happened today, would they be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall out? It was the same when she first met him. Initially, he thought that this fellow was a good-for-nothing with a weak temperament. Only in the end did he realize how wrong he was. To be able to cut off a piece of Hu Qianqiu's sleeve as an 8-meridian Earth Chakra martial master was definitely one of a kind in the world. At least those so-called geniuses that she knew of were just too ordinary compared to Zhong Shou. Her mind instinctively flashed back to the dawn when Zhong Shou's sword left the dust, his celestial-like body. Xianyuan Iren's eyes couldn't help but become slightly dazed. In the blink of an eye, he woke up from his stupor. He couldn't help but feel extremely embarrassed and ashamed. He lowered his head and replied with a buzzing sound. Without hesitation, he ran into the cloud-crossing carriage. Thinking to herself, why did she seem like a love-struck fool today? Zhong Shou laughed out loud, feeling that this little girl was sometimes really cute. He also jumped off the carriage and walked towards Zhong Yuan. At this moment, although the energy in his body was well coordinated and calm, his body still hadn't recovered. However, his physical strength still hadn't recovered and he could only activate the thunder-traveling spirit bone. His posture was stiff as he walked. Zhong Yuan's brows instantly furrowed. Before this, he had also heard the words of Zhong Shou and Hu Qianqiu. However, he didn't have the joy of keeping his life. Instead, he felt a chill in his heart and became more wary. At this moment, he was filled with wariness as he stared at Zhong Shou. What do you want to do? I, Zhong Yuan, have a worthless life. If you want to kill me, then kill me, I won't frown. However, if you want me, Zhong Yuan, to serve you, don't even think about it. I, Zhong Yuan, am indomitable and won't do things that betray my master. Zhong Shou was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He never expected this fellow to listen to his orders. He thought to himself, I don't need your heart, I just want your body. Who cares about what you think? Carefully sizing up Zhong Yuan, Samuraim's eyes slowly revealed a joyful expression. After looking, he still wasn't satisfied. He started to touch this fellow's body, feeling the bones and muscles as well as the chakra meridians in this person's body. This caused Zhong Yuan to feel a chill down his spine. A bad thought rose up in his mind. Was his luck bad and he met a pervert? Zhong Shou touched for a moment, feeling more and more satisfied. Then, he smiled and instructed Hu Zhongyuan, find some vines and tie him up. Then, find a spacious place to hang him up. Hu Zhongyuan's bruised and swollen face originally had a weird expression. At this moment, his entire body shivered. He looked at Zhong Shou with a weird expression. He thought to himself that this prince's preferences were a little different. Moreover, it was the heavy type. Actually, this Zhong Yuan's looks were not bad. However, the future mistress was at the side. Didn't he need to restrain himself a little? Until Zhong Shou frowned impatiently and stared over. Only then did he hesitantly run to find some rope. Every step he took, he would look back, his eyes filled with pity. Zhong Yuan's face couldn't help but turn green. His lips turned purple as he scolded. Zhong Shou, do you know that Taoists can be killed but not humiliated? I, Zhong Yuan, am a man. I would rather die than suffer such humiliation and do such dirty things with you. Why don't you just kill me? Since he had made up his mind, Zhong Yuan didn't hesitate anymore and bit down on his tongue. However, before he could bite down, Zhong Shou grabbed his chin. Pulling down, it was completely dislocated. He wanted to use the true qi in his body to break his meridians and end his own life. However, Zhong Shou's method of locking meridians was a little strange. Zhong Yuan's face turned red, but it was of no use. Zhong Shou didn't understand. Was this necessary? He only took off his clothes. Why did he want to die? It wasn't like he was a woman who wouldn't be able to get married after one look. Hu Zhongyuan's movements were extremely fast. A moment later, he returned with a bundle of green wooden vines. The black willow vine was as thick as a finger. Even if a fifth-level monster was entangled by it, it wouldn't be able to break free. His movements were extremely nimble as he took off all of Zhong Yuan's clothes, leaving only his underwear. Then, He deliberately found a place further away from the carriage and hung up Zhong Yuan, who was squealing like a pig being slaughtered and whose voice was unclear. He then sighed heavily and patted Zhong Yuan's shoulder. Only then did he shake his head and leave. Only when he saw that Chu Shui didn't avoid and was instead listlessly observing at the side did he realize that he had misunderstood. Zhong Shui actually took out hundreds of beast crystals and soul stones and drew talismans on the ground. Then, he took out some blood ink and drew many devilish talismans on Zhong Yuan's body. Although he didn't cultivate in spiritual cultivation, he was the future tribe leader of the Iron Tiger race and had seen a lot. The talismans that Zhong Shui drew were obviously filled with God intent, far stronger than those spirit masters he had seen before. The spiritual formation here was also really exquisite and connected to the earth veins. The moment it was drawn, the spiritual energy here instantly increased by several times. However, for some reason, it gave off a weird feeling like it wasn't a proper method. Just as he didn't understand what was going on, Zhong Shui casually made a hand sign. The beast crystals and soul stones on the ground instantly shone brightly. Large amounts of spiritual energy gathered over, like a thin layer wrapping around this place. The spiritual energy within the soul stones flowed out along the spiritual pattern lines and climbed onto Zhong Yuan's body. No matter how Zhong Yuan twisted his body, he was unable to shake it off. The aura here became more and more devilish and dark. Within 10 miles, large amounts of Yin energy essence were forcefully sucked out by the spiritual formation. Hu Zhongyuan didn't notice at all, his eyes fixed on Zhong Shui's hand that was still forming seals. Although he was controlling the ocean amounts of spiritual energy here, he was still doing it casually and easily, continuously changing the seals, controlling the gray-white spiritual energy, forming many unique talismans at the center of Zhong Yuan's brows. One after another, they entered his skin. He couldn't understand all of this, only his heart was like a raging wave, surging endlessly. After a long while, he took in a deep breath. Shui, did the prince cultivate in spiritual cultivation? What realm is he at now? That's right. He did cultivate in spiritual cultivation. Chu Shui was worried that Zhong Shui would torture her, so she didn't dare to shift her eyes away. She also didn't dare to be distracted, casually replying, "Young master was already at the out-of-body realm a month ago." Hu Zhongyuan's face couldn't help but flush red once more. His muscles were tightly clenched up, which was why he didn't shout out. Who knows whether it was excitement or shock? He vented it out. At this moment, what he wanted to do the most was to call his father back to personally witness this scene. 8 meridians of the bodily chakra realm, sword path one with the spirit. He thought that he already knew the true situation of Zhong Shui. Only now did he know that during the battle between Zhong Shui and Hu Qianqiu, he also didn't go all out. Speaking of which, the prince was going to be 14 in a few days. An out-of-body realm spirit master who wasn't even 14. What kind of monster was this? How was he going to let people live? In the past, he envied Zhong Shui for being able to enter Xiantian at such a young age. But now, compared to this crown prince, this guy was not even worth mentioning. His father scolded him that he wasn't even as good as trash. However, in his eyes, those words were an insult to the word trash. At this moment, Xianyuan Iren was also alerted and rushed nearby. She was also slightly distracted as she looked at the expressionless person within the spiritual formation who was skillfully controlling the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. So Zhong Shui was actually an out-of-body realm spirit master. So the use of talismans could reach such a realm, merging with spirit. He had obviously comprehended the true meaning of all the talismans, the Grandmaster realm. Chapter 154. Not long later, the gray energy injected into Zhong Yuan's brow, following which the talisman started to change color, forming a pale gold soul word. It was connected to tens of spiritual patterns, covering Zhong Yuan's body. In just a moment it all disappeared. Zhong Shou didn't notice the weird atmosphere behind him. He smiled as he looked at Zhong Yuan's body. This was a demon sect soul-controlling technique that he occasionally saw in the library in the future. It needed the soul power of close to 10,000 people to form a talisman to control a Xiantian expert. If there were 100,000 people, then even a martial ancestor realm expert might be able to try it. However, whether or not it was effective, Zhong Shou hadn't tried it before. Firstly, he wasn't a spirit master. Secondly, he couldn't really slaughter 10,000 people. Only when this place was close to the battlefield did Zhong Shou think of such a method. Anyways, there were so many dead people around and their vengeful souls hadn't dissipated. Sooner or later, they would be collected by the demon sect. Oh right, there's still this thing. I nearly forgot that this is something that demon sect disciples need. Zhong Shou recalled another item and flipped through his bag. Not long later, he took out 7 silver needles. They were as thin as a hair, the tip of the needle was like a blooming black lotus. This was one of the few things that Mingjue left on his body. It was known as the 7 Lotus Soul Needle, and was also a top talisman weapon. Its original use was to temporarily subdue and control high-grade beasts, having a miraculous effect. However, at this moment Zhong Shou had other uses for it. He inserted the 7 Lotus Soul Needles into Zhong Yuan's hair. Only one of them pierced in from the center of his brow and into his skin, forming a lotus mark on the surface of his skin. Actually, in terms of controlling the souls of people, the Demon Flag sect was an expert. Mingjue had numerous goo bugs and evil talisman weapons in his belongings. Zhong Shou felt that they were too disgusting and too sinister, directly destroying them. Only the 7 Lotus Soul Needles were the signature items of the demonic sect disciples. Their refining method was ordinary, and all the demonic sect disciples carried them with them. That was why he kept them. Once the lotus mark and the pale golden soul word merged into one, the light golden soul word became one. Zhong Shou drew a line with his finger, and a trace of sharp energy came out of his finger. He broke all the ropes on Zhong Yuan's body and unlocked all the chakras in his body. Upon seeing this, Zhong Yuan's expression immediately changed, revealing a hint of vigilance. Zhong Yuan snorted and turned to run without hesitation. He didn't have any intentions of going all out against Zhong Shou. In front of him was a martial ancestor with 5 meridians of the earth chakra level. Although the other was a fake pellet Xiantian, his martial path was so strong that even the second strongest person in Gantian Mountain, Hu Qianqiu, couldn't do anything to him. In front of these two people, he did not even have the qualifications to fight with his life on the line. Because he had been trapped for a long time, his qi and blood had stagnated. Zhong Yuan's body was also slightly stiff at this moment. However, his speed was as quick as lightning, moving 300 feet in an instant. However, after running roughly 500 feet, Zhong Shou smiled as he formed a seal, chanting a word and pointing out, "Freeze." The moment he said that, Zhong Yuan's 4 limbs stopped moving. However, his forward momentum didn't stop. His entire body fell to the ground. Zhong Shou laughed, his hand changing a seal. "Come back!" Zhong Yuan wanted to go against it, but even if he went all out to control it, his body couldn't move. Her body couldn't help but jump back to Zhong Shou's side after standing up. He couldn't move his entire body, and could only stare viciously at Zhong Shou, hoping that he could use his gaze to kill this cousin of his. Weird, it seems like his movements are too stiff. Zhong Shou shook his head and didn't understand. It seemed like this demon sect's secret technique wasn't as effective as what the book said. It was said that it was even more effective than Spirit Beast. He tried to cast spells to direct Zhong Yuan's movements to use that set of purple lightning spear. However, it was extremely awkward, not having any of the strength of a peak Xiantian. His internal energy circulation was also a little sluggish. Just like that, Zhong Shou barely understood. Zhong Yuan's will had some effect on his body and wasn't willing to cooperate with him. Naturally, his movements couldn't be smooth. Chu Shui tilted her head as she looked on from the side. After a short while, she didn't understand. Young master, it feels a little useless. When you fight with others, do you have to form seals like that? How troublesome is that? Moreover, I can take him down with one finger. Zhong Shou was also conflicted. Naturally, this secret technique wouldn't be so troublesome. Under normal circumstances, one just needed a thought to activate it. It wasn't much weaker than spirit beasts, so why would one need to form seals? Xianyuan Iren took in a deep breath, wanting to say something but stopping herself. Only when Samuraim looked over did she stop hesitating, shaking her head. Did the prince's secret technique come from the demon sect? However, I have never heard of demon sect techniques that could truly control martial artists with strong wills. Moreover, this method should also have a special magic tool to control it. This demon sect technique is mostly evil and cruel. Prince, you are the future monster king. In the future, you will have billions of people. However, it is best if you don't use such unrighteous and evil techniques. Also, this Zhong Yuan is your cousin after all. If you humiliate him like that, why don't you just kill him with one sword? Since this technique is useless, why not just let him die a quick death? Seeing Xianyuan Iren start to lecture him as she spoke, Zhong Shou couldn't help but feel a toothache. Zhong Yuan was extremely touched when he heard that, nearly tearing up. Miss Xianyuan was such a good person. For Gantian Mountain to have such a mistress, it was really fortunate. With his current situation, he would rather die just like that. Zhong Shou closed his eyes in deep thought. The demon sect technique he obtained was indeed incomplete, lacking a few pages at the front. At this moment, even with this set of 7 lotus soul needles, it couldn't make up for it. However, it wasn't like there was no solution. After a short while, just as Zhong Yuan's eyes shone with a glimmer of hope, Zhong Shou suddenly opened his mouth viciously. Why is it useless? If he doesn't listen in the future, I will kill him. I will let him go to the gates of Gantian Mountain City and torture him for 3 days and 3 nights. I will make him beg for death. Before he finished, Zhong Yuan fell to the ground with a plop, 2 streams of tears flowing down from the corners of his eyes. Who said that men didn't easily cry because they weren't deeply hurt? How did he end up in the hands of this little demon? Hu Zhongyuan's eyes instantly lit up, praising loudly. The prince is smart, you actually have such a method. Hu Zhongyuan has learned another move today. The prince is really a talent, really smart, I respect you. Zhong Shou felt weird, glancing sideways at Hu Zhongyuan. He thought to himself that this fellow didn't have much ability, but his bootlicking skills were really good. Chushua and Xianyuan Iren's faces turned red, both of them making a tisk sound and turning their heads away. This method was really vicious. As long as they had some face, they wouldn't dare to go against orders. Xianyuan Iren frowned. A moment later she calmed down. Since Zhong Yuan chose to be enemies with Zhong Shou, then naturally he had to bear the consequences. Although Zhong Shou's method was a little too much, it was expected. Although she insisted on the path of righteousness, she wasn't inflexible. Zhong Shou once again formed a seal, and as expected Zhong Yuan didn't resist, allowing him to control him like a puppet. He broke out into a laugh and released the control on Zhong Yuan. However, this fellow's life and death was still in his hands. He didn't need to worry about this fellow escaping or wanting to kill himself. Casually reaching out, he kept the useful beast crystals and wiped away the spiritual formation here. Zhong Shou's brows suddenly rose up as he looked into the distance. He saw a few cavalry galloping over. It was 3 Xiantian masters wearing black armor, riding windrider foals. In just a moment they were in front of him. When they saw Xianyuan Iren, the eyes of the person in front lit up. After a few lashes, He flew in front of Xianyuan Iren and bowed. "Little miss, good fortune. The city lord's wife is seriously ill. We were ordered by the city lord to invite little miss back." While he said that, he looked around. When he saw Zhong Shou, his gaze instantly turned cold. Xianyuan Iren was startled, and in the next moment, she looked coldly at Li Yunyang behind her. The latter lowered her head and sighed. These people had finally arrived. However, they had arrived too late. Just as Li Yunyang sighed, nearby, there was a place where Zhong Shou didn't notice the mist. The voice of an old man was also filled with emotions. That sword strike truly had a profound meaning and an endless aftertaste. Even after half a day it is still unforgettable. What a good attacker, he should be above the 9 heavens. No wonder that Hu Qianqiu would lose to him in the end. Thinking about it, the sword really soars in the sky, unrestrained and untraceable, changing unpredictably. That isn't a normal sword. When he said that, Yan Fan's face was filled with reminiscence, like he was still immersed in some kind of mental state and enjoying it. Thinking about it, this spiritual movement sword intent is really similar to our 100 spirit unique sword and is extremely compatible with each other. With just a little bit of cultivation, he can achieve. Although this place was in midair, within the cloud layer. However, there were tables and chairs, as well as banquet tables. Sitting opposite Yan Fan was Taiyuan fairy Shui Lingbo. At this moment, she was laughing coldly. "How shameless! You say that he is suitable to cultivate your 100 spirit unique sword, but with his sword path talents, which sword technique can't he cultivate to the peak?" Yan Fan chuckled and opened one of his eyes. Could it be that fairy still hasn't given up? This kid is willing to give up huge amounts to save the millions of people here. One can see that he is kind-hearted, a person of the righteous path. Kind-hearted? He is just casually giving out and you say that he is kind-hearted? If that is the case, then he wouldn't cultivate such an evil sword technique. She originally wanted to argue, but the more Shui Lingbo said, the more excited she got, her eyes shining. This kid kills without blinking, his thoughts are careful, his methods are vicious, and his personality is great. He is suitable for Maicang Xingdao. That's not right. Yan Fan shook his head. This kid knows that those slaves are definitely going to die. However, he still didn't hesitate to attack, so one can see his personality. How is such a kid suitable for Yortzang Xingdao? As for that set of swordsmanship. Chapter 155. That's not right. Yan Fan shook his head. This kid knew that those slaves were definitely going to die. However, he still didn't hesitate and attacked. One can see his personality. How is such a kid suitable for Yortzang Xingdao? As for that sword technique. Speaking of that set of swords, Yan Fan's eyes were filled with shock and fear. How was there such an evil sword technique in the cloud world? Who knows where Zhong Shou learned it? When that white body waved the sword, it was like a death god descending to the world. When the sword slashed out, it was time for people to die. In terms of the sword path, naturally Zhong Shou's sword that seemed like it came from the heavens was the most shocking. However, in terms of killing, life and death battles, this sword technique known as the Styx River Death Sword was the best choice. Closing his eyes, Yan Fan's tone regained its calmness, controlling the death energy of heaven and earth to injure the enemy. Although it is slightly evil, it follows the path of the heavens and doesn't fall into the demonic path. As long as you don't use it often, it is okay. Seeing Shui Lingbo's lips twitch, revealing a look of disdain, Yan Fan couldn't help but laugh. He knew that if they continued to argue, there wouldn't be an outcome. He shook his head. The more I look at this kid, the more I like him. I can't bear to give up. However, this stalemate between us isn't a solution. Shui Lingbo continued to laugh coldly. What do you want? During these 20-odd days, we have already gambled 10 rounds. 3 rounds of sword battle, 2 rounds of talisman drawing, 4 rounds of chess. The outcome was a draw. What do you want to gamble this time? If you want to talk about painting, I Shui Lingbo am not so dumb. If I say that I want to go all out and fight, you probably won't agree. Yan Fan couldn't help but be speechless. This matter was a little tough. Actually, it wasn't that he couldn't win. However, in chess, one had to give up 3 words. In sword and talisman drawing, there were many restrictions. Helplessly, Lei Dong wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Because of this matter, he had been trapped for more than 30 days without being able to escape. He did not know when he would be able to escape. Suddenly, an idea popped up in his head. Lei Dong grunted, "The 2 of you, actually it is not impossible. Why don't the 2 sects have 1 person and 2 masters?" Before he finished, Yan Fan and Shui Lingbo looked over coldly with killing intent. The former snorted heavily, "Nonsense. If the 2 sects were to share, who would be the master and who would be the assistant? If I learned Song Shengdao's heresy, how am I going to answer to the founder of Wujue Villa? If such a person falls into the evil path, I would rather take his life with my own hand." Shui Lingbo also sneered, "I'm more afraid that Zhong Shou's brain would be damaged by your pedantic thoughts. If he wants to enter Wujue Villa, Shui Lingbo must kill this future enemy for me, Song Shengdao." Lei Dong couldn't help but roll his eyes, looking into the sky with no spirit in his eyes. He had already lost all hope towards these 2 people. He looked to the side, only to see Zhao Yanran casually playing around with a knife and a sword. Her eyes were infatuated, filled with interest. If one looked carefully, one would notice that the trajectory of the knife and sword was similar to Zhong Shou's and Hu Qianqiu's attacks and defenses, only lacking a little bit of meaning. It was obvious that the battle just now had benefited this crazy woman. He couldn't help but feel annoyed. This woman really knew how to enjoy herself. His pitiful Miss Jinru, after not seeing him for so many days, she must be really lonely, on the roof of the carriage, the cloud-crossing carriage that Xianyuan Iren was in also left. Zhong Shou sighed slightly. For some reason, he felt a sense of emptiness, as if something was slipping away from him. No wonder. Just like that, there were only 4 people left beside him. Following which Zhong Shou's eyes turned dark. The gazes of the 3 Xiantian masters from Xian Mountain City made one feel really uncomfortable. He didn't care if they looked down on him, but that expression was one of hatred and disgust. Chu Shui was also filled with reluctance, her eyes slightly red as she looked into the distance. What a waste! Why did Miss Iren's mother suddenly fall sick? Doesn't that mean that we can only see her in a few months? God bless her, please let her be fine. Zhong Shou rolled his eyes. Did this girl really think that the head of Xian Mountain City was really sick? However, he wasn't willing to comment on this matter. There was no need to think of the worst of others, or perhaps he was measuring the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. Who knows if he really fell ill? Just as he shook his head, in the next instant Chu Shui turned around and said seriously, "Young master, Shui misses her, what should I do? Why don't we just go to Xian Mountain City now and marry Miss?" Zhong Shou was speechless, suddenly tapping Chu Shui's head. "I think you don't miss her, just those medicinal candies." Chu Shui was shocked, instantly panicking, her eyes turning slightly. "Young master, then we don't need to return to Gantian Mountain City. A few days ago, didn't you say that you wanted to rush back to take over the Monster King position? Go back to do what? To be played by others?" Zhong Shou laughed coldly, his eyes shining. However, he didn't notice that his attention had been successfully drawn away by Chu Shui. With Hu Qianqiu's help, 65% of Gantian Mountain's strength could be controlled by him. However, if he returned now, it was okay if he was willing to be a puppet. However, once he showed that he wanted to take over power, the reactions of Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang were hard to predict. With a huge enemy outside, if there were people who tried to drag them down and stab them in the dark, the outcome wouldn't be good. However, it was because Hu Qianqiu's strength was far above his expectations that he changed his mind. With this ocean-stabilizing godly needle, he could help him suppress Gantian Mountain. Why not continue to stay outside? Wouldn't it be more comfortable to return after breaking through to Xiantian? Speaking of which, it was because his strength was too weak. If he had Hu Qianqiu's realm, under the Ascended Realm, he would be invincible. Even if he was like Hu Zhongyuan, at least when he met those Xuanwu ancestors, he would be able to fight. Thinking back to the eight-tailed sky fox king race Shui family that Hu Qianqiu mentioned, as well as the mother race Lu family that ruled 800 worlds, he couldn't help but have a headache. As expected, he needed to find a strong backing. Be it the Kenzo sect behind Wujua Villa or Tsang Xingdao of Taiyuan sect, they were powers that could go up against him. Unfortunately, thinking about this matter, Zhong Shou was really conflicted. All of a sudden, he turned around, not bothering about anything as he shouted towards the sky. "Hey! I say, have the two of you come to a conclusion? If you still can't, why don't you let me go to Tailing sect to become a disciple?" Hu Zhongyuan, who was in front, looked around at a loss. There was no one around who knew who Zhong Shou was talking to and what craziness he was going on. However, going to that Tailing sect was not bad. Other people didn't know, but he had heard people talk about it. That was the top shrine in the cloud world. If he had that sect as his backing, Gantian Mountain would be safe. Gantian Mountain would definitely be safe and all the chaos would be solved. Just as he was feeling weird, there was a crackling sound from the side. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the clear sky for thousands of miles. A lightning bolt that was as thick as a water bucket brushed past Zhong Shou's body and suddenly struck beside the carriage. Instantly, a 300 feet wide hole was blown out. Those 10 over Windrider foals all neighed in unison, jumping up in shock. Zhong Yuan, who was the coachman, tried his best to calm them down. Hu Zhongyuan also felt a chill run down his spine. This bolt of lightning came without any warning, and if it struck a person, they would be dead. If it struck a person, even if he was a martial ancestor who cultivated to the 5th meridian of the earth chakra level, he would be turned into charcoal. To be able to send out such a strike, one had to be at least above the day-wandering realm. Luckily, this carriage was floating in the air, which was why it wasn't affected by the lightning. Zhong Shou's inside, he knew that the outcome would be like this. He calmly smoothed out the hair that was standing up due to the lightning. Suddenly, he had an idea, continuing to look towards the sky, using a negotiating tone. "This can't do, that can't do. Zhong Shou's bright future was wasted by all of you. I can't just give you no compensation. Moreover, before I become your disciple, you have to give me a gift, right?" There was a moment of silence in the sky. A short while later, a ball of light descended from the clouds and landed on the roof of the carriage. Upon closer inspection, there were exactly 10 wine bottles the size of 2 fists. Although the bottle openings were sealed, there was still a thick fragrance that wafted over. Zhong Shou took a look, his lips twitching. Wasn't this the 10 bottles of celestial wine that Lei Dong promised him? The two people above were really stingy. They were people who wouldn't act until they saw a rabbit. If he wasn't taken in, then they wouldn't give him any benefits at all. He was furious in his heart and decided to fight to the death. Zhong Shou scoffed, pointing towards the sky. "I have made up my mind. Whoever gives me benefits first, I, Zhong Shou, will take that person as my master. I won't go back on my words." This time, before he could even finish his sentence, 2 more balls of light descended from the sky. On the left was a ball of blue light, within it was a spiritual weapon. It spun and spun as it landed, heavily pinning onto a rock beside the carriage. The sword handle shook continuously, but it actually didn't break. On the other side was a small medicine bottle which landed in front of Zhong Shou at the same time. The fragrance of the medicine spread out, no weaker than Lei Dong's 10 bottles of celestial wine. Zhong Shou was delighted, just as he was about to work harder to extort more. Lightning flashed in the sky. Another vast sword chi wriggled in the air like a dragon, swimming in all directions. Be it the lightning glow or the sword energy, they were filled with killing intent. Zhong held his breath. He decided to stop while he was ahead. Looking at the situation, if he said anything more, the lightning glow and sword energy would directly slash down. He cursed out in his heart. Just as he was about to order Chushue to keep all the medicine and wine bottles, she suddenly stopped him. However, when he turned his head, he was stunned. He saw Chushue holding an opened wine bottle, her cheeks flushed red, her eyes blurred and unfocused. Zhongshu's brows instinctively rose. Just as he was about to send a heavy punch over, he saw a ball of energy rise up from Chushue's body. The spiritual energy around also fluctuated continuously. Along with her breathing, it surged in a regular pattern. Chushue also opened her eyes in a daze, and then suddenly burped. Young master, Shue seems to have broken through to Xiantian. Chapter 156. After all, it was right next to the Grade 2 mined stone mine. There were also hundreds of thousands of troops and tens of Xiantian experts waiting at the side. Although Zhongshu had a 5-meridian martial ancestor, Hu Zhongyuan, and a peak Xiantian Zhongling who was comparable to a martial ancestor by his side, he didn't fear them. However, he didn't want to cause too much trouble. He hurriedly packed up and swiftly left. Zhongyuan drove the carriage. Following what he wanted, the carriage directly turned and headed south of the Cloud Continent, speeding all the way. Hu Zhongyuan naturally settled down on the roof of the carriage. Chu Shui originally followed in, but who knows what she thought about, she suddenly became shy and ran to the roof to stay together with her uncle, Hu Zhongyuan. Zhongshu could only occupy the carriage alone. He first took out the pill bottle that fell from the sky and opened it, only to see that there were hundreds of red pills within. Zhongshu smelled it and scraped off some powder, placing it in his mouth to taste. Only then did his eyes reveal a look of understanding. So it is the ancient body-washing pill of Wujua Villa. How petty. No matter what, it is the 5th shrine of the Cloud World. I thought that they would at least have 3 to 5 human pinnacle pills. Curling his lips in disdain, Samuraim's eyes flashed with joy. The medicine wasn't good, it was the best to use. That Wujua Villa head probably noticed that his body had the essence of the lightning phoenix, which was why he took out this item. If it was a normal person, this pill wouldn't be of much use. However, it could help him cleanse his body every day and quickly merge with the Xiantian essence energy. Following which he casually reached out and that spiritual sword appeared in his hand. Since that ancient body-washing pill was given to him by Yen Fan, then this sword naturally came from Shui Lingbo. It was the same style as the lightning tooth sword. Holding it in his hand, Zhongshu's eyes lit up. The talisman markings were also really ordinary. The materials used might not all be of the best quality. However, when Zhongshu injected a thread of world-shocking true energy into it, he instantly felt something different. The spirit channels in his body were extremely smooth, and the flow of his true qi was not hindered at all. The lightning that exploded from the blade was 3 times more powerful than the lightning tooth sword he had used before. It's actually a Tier 2 spirit weapon. It's really a good sword. I wonder which weapon refining grandmaster made it? The spiritual formation within was obviously really normal. However, it was the ingenious combination of those talismans that raised this spiritual weapon to the upper grade of the 2nd grade, close to the 3rd grade. There were a total of 9 levels of spirit weapons, corresponding to spirit beasts. Actually, in Grade 1 to Grade 3 spiritual weapons, the spiritual formation power carved onto them corresponded with the natural ability of beasts of the same grade. However, in the hands of an expert, the strength it could unleash was naturally different from normal beast. Zhongshu looked at the sword hilt again, and saw that there were 3 small characters engraved on it: Sword Sculptor. Swordsmith? So it was made by this ancient weapon-refining grandmaster. Speaking of which, the rumors that Taiyuan Fairy obtained the armory of an emperor during the cloud-desolate era shouldn't be wrong. Zhong Shou sighed. That fairy's luck was only lower than that of the god emperor. If one looked closely at her life, it was pretty much smooth sailing, and she would be able to easily get past the occasional tough situation. In terms of luck, she was the best in history. In the future, any sword that the sword sculptor made would be worth 10 to 100 times more, and people would treat it as a treasure. Even in this era, it would be extremely expensive. Zhong Shou didn't have any thoughts of cherishing it, straightforwardly swapping out the original sword. Spirit swords were refined to be used in the first place. If that sword sculptor knew that his sword would one day become a toy for people to admire, he would probably cry out in sadness. However, these 2 spiritual grandmasters who stood at the peak of the cloud world were really stingy. The things they took out couldn't compare to what Xianyuan Iren gave him. The value of the bottles and jars he took out at that time was enough to be worth several times the sum of the sword and the bottle of primordial body cleansing pills. Although he was being kept and living off of, and was looked down on by Li Yunyang and the 3 Xiantians of Xian Mountain City, Zhong Shou still felt really blessed. Next, it's this item. After swapping out the sword, Zhong Shou's face slowly turned serious. In his hand there were 3 black strawberry-like fruit. Apart from that, there were also all the petals that fell from the darkness blooming Sirius. In terms of the grade of treasures, this black blooming Sirius was far from the lightning phoenix egg. However, in the eyes of spirit masters, the value of this black blooming Sirius wasn't much weaker than the latter. However, he had only heard of the use of this item. There were very few spirit masters who could get black blooming Sirius. Those ancient records were often vague and did not describe the method of using it in detail. He himself didn't have any proper spirit master legacy, which was why he had no idea. Normally speaking, for spiritual fruits, no matter if they were poisonous or not, swallowing them was the best way. Zhong Shou was about to open his mouth when an image flashed in his mind, recalling the scene when he swallowed the essence of the lightning phoenix. My heaven energy swallowing conversion technique can completely swallow the life mark of the lightning phoenix egg, so it might be able to be used here. Maybe this technique that swallows the essence energy of heaven and earth to make up for what the body lacks has such an effect. Zhong Shou couldn't help but enter deep thought, thinking about it for a long while. Following which he decisively gave up on the idea of eating, holding a black blooming Sirius in his palm. Heaven energy swallowing conversion technique, absorb. A bright glow exploded out from his eyes as Zhong Shou activated his true qi and started to absorb, only to see a black thread follow the meridians of his arm and spread up. In just a moment it started to split up. A portion charged into the dantian, while a portion entered the Shunshao meridian at the center of his forehead. Not only was the darkness essence energy extremely thick, but it was also extremely pure. The moment it entered his soul, it caused his soul ocean whirlpool to be dyed in a layer of black color. When it reached the end of the absorption, his arms suddenly swelled up and bulged. At the same time, there was an explosion in his mind, his ears filled with a chaotic ringing sound. That whirlpool soul ocean whirlpool spun swiftly, the surrounding 12 god talismans shone brightly. Zhong Shou shook his head, quietly waiting for this change to calm down. Once the pain in his head lessened, he entered meditation once more. Then, he saw that above his soul ocean, there was a pure black flower that hadn't bloomed yet. At first glance, it looked like the reappearance of the darkness blooming Sirius. However, if one looked closely, one could feel that it was a little different. The entire flower was actually made up of numerous spiritual patterns and talismans. This heaven energy swallowing conversion technique can actually swallow the source of life. Zhong Shou was startled, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. Maybe in the last life, those people who relied on the heaven energy swallowing conversion technique to create their own techniques to swallow the essence energy of others, and even himself, all took a wrong path. He had probably only just opened a door to the true use of this great technique at this moment. He also felt really surprised. Why would such a heaven-defying ability be spread in that virtual world? Those large sects, hundreds of ascended experts, none of them noticed the mysteries within? Taking in a deep breath, Zhong Shou slowly calmed down, focusing on that Sirius. It was without a doubt a Xiantian talisman. At this moment, above his soul ocean, it formed something similar to a god talisman. However, the roots of this Sirius were directly connected to the deepest part of his soul ocean. Similar to the other 12 god talisman seeds, it would absorb the soul power within his soul ocean. However, he didn't use it to strengthen his body. Instead, he wrapped it tightly within the flower bud. Samuraim's eyes lit up, using the energy swallowing technique to absorb the other 2 black Sirius fruit, such that in the center of his soul ocean there were 2 more Sirius. Silently meditating, those 3 Sirius had been nourished for close to 2 hours. Zhong Shou had a thought, and the black wave sword beside him rose into the air. Like an arrow, it swiftly shot out of the window, striking towards a giant stone 1,000 feet away. Instant youth, 3-layer waves. When the sword technique was activated, the first Sirius within Zhong Shou's soul ocean suddenly bloomed. The spiritual energy injected into the black wave sword also suddenly increased. 3 swords in a row, one stronger than the last, slashing onto the stone, causing numerous stone shrapnel to fly up. When that black sword image flashed across, only to see that the 10-foot thick giant stone, which required several people to wrap their arms around it, was weakened by his black wave sword in one sword, following which it spun around and returned to the front of Zhong Shou. Along with the help of this Sirius, the soul power I infused into the black wave sword actually instantly increased by 5% power. As expected, it is a good thing. What the book said wasn't exaggerated at all. No wonder those spirit masters would treat it as a top treasure. However, I can't rely on it in a short while. It was said that the longer this Sirius was nourished and stored, the stronger the power would be when it exploded out. It was pretty much limitless. In the last life, there were out-of-body realm spirit masters who relied on the help of this flower to kill a return-to-sun realm spirit master in one strike. Storing soul power within the flower bud, accumulating it for 20 years, directly crossing 2 grades and killing a return-to-sun realm expert who formed 7 true spiritual talismans, shocking the entire cloud continent. This item could be said to be one of the few external techniques of spirit masters that could help one to fight above their grade. As such, one could imagine how much spirit masters in the world chased after this item. Although it couldn't increase soul power by much, it was still seen as a top treasure. Naturally, this item wasn't without restrictions. After it exploded out, it would be like the blooming of a Sirius, instantly disappearing, at most 3 breaths of time. In other words, if Zhong Shou's realm remained stagnant, even if he nourished it for 20 years, he would at most be able to explode out with the strength of a peak return-to-sun realm spirit master. Moreover, it would only be for 9 breaths of time. What Zhong Shou cared more about was the future. Once he stepped into the day-wandering realm, just the power of these 3 Sirius would allow him to not fear normal body-forming spirit masters. A life-and-death battle, 1 breath was all it took. Those spirit masters should have only obtained the Xiantian talismans within the Sirius. I used the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique to swallow and directly obtained the life source mark. Who knows what changes will happen to these 3 Sirius? After observing for half a day, he still couldn't see anything different. Zhong Shou could only shake his head and toss these flowers to the side. Within his soul ocean, he went all out to form talismans. Since that day when he fought with Li Yaling, 20 consecutive days Zhong Shou had been forming true spiritual talismans within his soul ocean. At this moment, it was time for him to reap the rewards. Chapter 157. If one looked closely, one would see that within Zhong Shou's soul ocean whirlpool, there were hundreds of talisman patterns floating about. Along with Zhong Shou's intent, many brand new true spiritual charms were formed in the center of the soul ocean. Usually, each time he formed one, it would require Zhong Shou to spend large amounts of time and effort. However, at this moment, his mental state was unusually excited. Not only was he fully focused, but his inspiration seemed to be endless. With just a thought, he could draw in the air and create a true spiritual charm. Before this, when he went all out in the battle with Hu Qianqiu, under the pressure of this 8-meridian Xuanwu ancestor, his life potential was close to exploding out. From start to finish, his mind was in a state of excitement. All his thoughts were exceptionally clear. If he cultivated his energy now, he would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. However, the one who benefited the most was Zhong Shou's soul. The number of true spiritual charms is enough. Today I can form true spiritual charms. Talismans represented the laws of heaven and earth, and talismans were the outer appearance of the laws and all the phenomena that were caused. The number of true spiritual charms was enough, which meant that the true spiritual charms that were gathered in his soul ocean were enough to support this law. When Zhong Shou's intent rose up, those true spiritual charms that were spread out without any pattern crazily charged over. All the true spiritual charms gathered at the center of the soul ocean, continuously combining and reconstructing. In just a moment, one could see a silver-white talisman appear within the soul ocean whirlpool. Threads of electricity spread out in all directions. In just a moment, it filled his entire soul. It also connected with the lightning phoenix illusionary image above, becoming more and more majestic. The first true spiritual talisman that Zhong Shou chose was the lightning word. Not only because he had the lightning phoenix life mark, but also because this true spiritual talisman was the biggest one out of all the talismans that power had. The moment this true spiritual talisman was formed, threads of lightning glow flashed around Zhong Shou's body. Comprehension rose up in his heart. He knew that in the future when he used lightning element techniques, not only could he save a large portion of the steps when he formed seals enchanted, but he could also double it. Its might would be increased by at least 2 times, and it was much stronger than those people who had similarly condensed the lightning talisman. Then, his soul ocean suddenly exploded outwards. All the spiritual energy within, under the stimulation of the true spiritual talisman, actually split into 2 into 4. Only when the area expanded by close to double did it finally stop. How quick! It actually increased close to double the soul power growth of a spirit master. As expected, forming spiritual charms is the right path. Zhong Shou's eyes lit up, revealing a look of surprise. When he cultivated in the past, even if he cultivated, it would only increase of his soul power increase by close to 6,000ths of a thousand. But now it increased by close to double. The true talisman's spiritual restriction was to strengthen one's source of origin and improve the quality of one's soul. Naturally, the effects were different from ordinary cultivation. Just as Zhong Shou wanted to work harder to form the water talisman at the back, Zhong Shou's eyes lit up. However, just as he formed 2 more true spiritual charms, he felt a swelling pain in his head, and his consciousness became heavy. I've reached the limit. As expected, there is no such thing as reaching the heavens in one step. Zhong Shou didn't hesitate, decisively stopping his meditation and starting to breathe in and out. The cultivation of this world-shocking spiritual art was much simpler than forming true spiritual charms. Swallowing and spitting spiritual energy from heaven and earth, after a few cycles, the true qi in Zhong Shou's body started to surge, continuously activating it, merging with the newly increased world-shocking true energy. One water, one fire, they were like a spiral as they moved forwards in his meridians. The remaining meridians above his lungs had become really loose due to Zhong Shou's non-stop training in the past 10 days. Today's battle with Hu Qianqiu caused it to totally collapse. Zhong Shou pretty much didn't use much strength to open them up one by one. Then, all the strength gathered into one, like two thin needles stabbing viciously into the outer chakra. Just as those blockages were drilled open, more Xiantian essence energy in his body turned into fire and water true qi, merging into the chakra around his body. Zhong Shou made use of the strength to take a mile after taking an inch. He was invincible all the way, piercing the various major acupoints of the outer chakra one by one. The 9 meridians of the body chakra. Each chakra was made up of 24 major acupoints as well as numerous smaller ones. Only the outer chakra was different, having a total of 48 major acupoints spread out around his body. Along with the meridians, Zhong Shou had a total of 96 acupoints in his body. Zhong Shou used the golden needle acupoint searching method. Based on his understanding of the meridians of the human body in his last life, he could only find 26, which was 52 acupoints. As for the remaining acupoints, he was still unable to confirm them. At this moment, the strength he gathered was only able to open 24 acupoints before it started to run out. Pretty much every acupoint he opened would cause a bloody hole to appear all over his body. He actually still had some strength left in his body. As long as he stored it up, he should be able to open a few more acupoints. Zhong Shou knew the theory of stopping while he was ahead. His body circulated a few more times, causing the meridians around his body to slowly calm down. All the true qi returned to his energy ocean as well as the major acupoints around his body. As expected, fighting with experts to bring out the potential of one's life force is the best shortcut to cultivation. If it was a normal day, even with the lightning phoenix essence, I would need close to 2 months to be able to open the outer chakra. However, today I managed to do it in an instant, a full 4 months of tough cultivation. Unfortunately, it is hard to find an opponent in this world. Without a suitable person, there is no point in fighting. Although the battle today wasn't a life and death battle. However, under the pressure of Hu Qianqiu, an 8-meridian Xuanwu master, Zhong Shou benefited a lot, even more than the battle with 100,000 blood killer Li Yaling that day. What he saw now was only the initial gains. The remaining portion would be slowly revealed in the next month. Bringing out the potential of his life force would cause more Xiantian essence energy to be absorbed by his body. During these few months, his cultivation speed would also greatly increase. It was enough for him to easily step into the peak of the bodily chakra realm. 9 meridians of the bodily chakra, what is my strength like now? Along with Zhong Shaoxin's thoughts moving, a glow shot out from his fingertip. Only to see water and fire intertwining, lightning flashing. This strike directly shot out close to 20 feet. Energy penetrated 70 feet. My world-shocking spiritual art, spiral true qi, is much more focused and sharper than normal martial arts. Based on this calculation, my strength should be around 10,000 kilograms. Zhong Shou felt slightly helpless. The acupoints on his body were double that of normal people. Due to him grasping the golden needle acupoint technique, normal people could only open 10 over acupoints in one chakra meridian, but he could open all of them. Logically speaking, be it strength or true qi storage, it should be close to double that of normal martial masters. However, a large portion of his true qi was lost in the internal friction. Not only was his strength similar to normal 9-meridian martial masters, but at most he was slightly stronger. Even his stamina was far from that of normal people. This was also because he had been continuously strengthening his spiral meridians. If it was before, when he had just entered 7 Meridian Mythic Master, he wouldn't even have 80% of a normal person's strength. He could only hope that in the future, when the spiral meridians were fully formed, it would take a turn for the better. He didn't really hope to have double the strength of others. However, with 2 meridians at the same time, his cultivation time was also double that of others. No matter what, his strength and true chi storage had to exceed normal people. Only then would it make sense. Sighing slightly, Zhong-Shou closed his eyes once more. The sword battle not long ago did not only bring out the potential of his life force. It was also a form of training for his sword technique. It was actually a good thing for him to start practicing his swordsmanship from scratch. He could reflect on himself and discover many areas where he was lacking and wrong in the past. There were even some areas that could be improved and improved, allowing him to build a stronger foundation. The intense battle with Hu Qianqiu had caused many weaknesses in his sword techniques to be exposed, especially those last few swords, which pretty much caused his fundamental martial path to step into a whole new hall. Just as Zhong-Shou's carriage was speeding towards the south of the Cloud Continent, at the place where Zhong-Shou and Hu Qianqiu had fought intensely, 2 skinny figures were standing at the top of a nearby hill. They were the 2 people who had appeared at the place where Li Yaling had died. Among them, Chou Ling had his arms crossed in front of his chest, impatience written all over his face. "Senior brother Yun, what are you looking at? There are no traces here at all." "There are no traces." The teen surnamed Yun nodded his head and looked into the distance. Looking out, there was only a piece of flat land with 3 to 5 trees scattered about. There wasn't anything worth paying attention to. However, yesterday this place was filled with righteous energy. Even the Ocean City Lord didn't dare to get close. "There are no traces at all. Instead, it is a little suspicious." "That makes sense." Chou Ling laughed and didn't think much of it. "Since this place has already been dealt with by someone, there is no point in us checking it out." The teen surnamed Yun smiled and didn't retort, only saying expressionlessly, "I forgot to say, this morning Cloud Saint City sent news that Master had already checked it out. The Xiantian experts near Cloud Saint City didn't even get close to the Blood Valley. Another thing is that this Gantian mountain prince knows Gong Shinran in Linhai College. 2 years ago, their relationship could be said to be really close." Chou Ling's eyes lit up, revealing a deep thought. Speaking of which, this Gantian mountain prince is really suspicious? Although he himself was a cripple, his father had left behind many subordinate. "Oh right, these 2 days are a little weird." Yunxia Mountain and Blazing Flame Mountain were originally prepared to gather their subordinates to surround and kill this prince nearby. However, after midnight yesterday, the followers of these 2 forces were all wiped out overnight. Also, that Zhongling is nowhere to be found. People like Purple Lightning Spear Zhong Yuan are also nowhere to be found. How weird. All of these people can be eliminated, and the only one left is the Crown Prince. The teen surnamed Yun didn't agree or disagree, a cold glow appearing in his eyes. Now that most people are dead, no matter if it is him or not, as long as we kill this kid, we can take revenge for old me. Chapter 158. Quietly looking at the boundless lake, Zhong-Shou's thoughts were in a mess, filled with emotions. Roughly 10,000 years later, there would be a huge city here. And he was born in the vicinity. When he was young, he struggled bitterly here, and after he made a name for himself, he lived here. He was born here and grew up here, bearing his numerous joys and sorrows, as well as numerous memories. Sighing, Zhong-Shou waved away the sadness in his heart. He was already an ancient person from 10,000 years ago, and there was not even a shadow of that huge city in the future. This water fairy lake is really F***king wide. This is the first time I've seen such a huge lake. Hu Zhongyuan had followed closely behind Zhong-Shou since he jumped off the carriage. At this moment, he was in awe. However, Why did young master come here? Although the scenery here is great, there aren't many people within a few thousand miles. There are also numerous beasts nearby, but I'm not afraid of that. Only in this water fairy lake is a black water chill serpent. Zhong Shou smiled slightly and didn't reply. He came to the water fairy lake this time for his barriers from heaven. To solve this obstacle, walking the path that he had walked before was the best. Who knew what the situation was like 10,000 years ago? As for that chill serpent, Zhong Shou didn't really care much about it. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid, but that this chill serpent should have fallen into a deep sleep. When it woke up 20 years later, it had evolved into a god-beast body. In Donglin Cloud Continent it had caused a huge storm. Not only were there many records of it in the history books of the nearby cities, but there were also many related quests in the God Emperor game. As a mid-late stage dungeon boss, it had been tortured and killed many times. This was why Zhong Shou wasn't worried at all. He was only worried that the geography of that place would be different from 10,000 years later, and he would have to find another place to cultivate. When the cloud crossing carriage stopped by the lakeside, the four of them began to work together. They chose a relatively high and dry area near the lakeside and built a few wooden houses as temporary residences. The four of them were all Xiantian martial artists, and Zhong Shou and Chu Shui were even spirit masters. It was extremely convenient for them to do this kind of woodworking. With a few slashes, the wood was sliced into pieces in an extremely neat manner. Using a few fire element spells to slightly roast it, he would be able to dehydrate it. Zhong Shou had some talent in architecture. Even though the wooden house was built in a hurry, it still looked beautiful. After that, he assigned tasks to the three of them. Catch fish in the lake? And 3,000 a day? You're not allowed to sleep until you're done? Chu Shui furrowed her brows. Could it be that young master was retaliating? That was most likely the case. Catching birds was not enough, and now he wanted to catch fish? Young master, can you not go? Why don't you let Shui warm your bed? I really can't sleep with you. Shui and young master are still young. Looking at the weird gazes that Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Yuan shot over, Zhong Shou's face turned red for the first time, and his expression was one of awkwardness. He directly knocked her head. What are you thinking about? You are nimble and not fast enough. Catching fish in the lake is the best solution for the problem. If you continue to make excuses, be careful that I don't make you copy books again. Chu Shui was still frowning, thinking that if they wanted to catch so many fish, they might as well kill her. Just as she was about to bargain, Zhong Shou picked up a thick talisman scripture and gave out a vicious laugh. His heart skipped a beat, and he jumped into the water in an extremely obedient manner. Zhong Shou then looked at Zhong Yuan, who was in a lifeless state. He didn't say any nonsense, directly flicking a piece of paper over. The latter casually caught it, casually taking a look, and then he was startled. Daily forward step spear 100 times, left spinning spear 125 times, right step spear 100 times. They were all basic spear techniques, but what was this mess? To let him, a peak Xiantian expert, train in all this? He originally wanted to ask, but then he remembered that he was like a walking corpse, and had nothing to live for. He would just follow this kid to train. He didn't mind, keeping the piece of paper in his arms. To let him stay at the entrance of Gantian Mountain City for 3 days and 3 nights, this prince might really do it. Zhong Shou smiled, not bothering about him. His gaze exchanged glances with Hu Zhongyuan, who was filled with anticipation. Old brother Hu, you are twice my age, and also a 5-meridian martial ancestor expert. Do you need me to give you pointers? Hu Zhongyuan laughed, shaking his head disapprovingly. There is no seniority in learning, the one who reaches the top is the first. Although the prince hasn't reached Xiantian, you have already comprehended sword intent, and your sword path is one with the spirit. In terms of cultivation, even my father isn't your opponent. I, Hu Zhongyuan, have only comprehended the strength of the martial path. Since I entered martial ancestor, I have not improved much and have been unable to break through. If I can get some pointers from the prince, I will definitely improve. Zhong Shou sighed with a headache. The father and son of the Hu family cultivated in blade technique. Although the blade path and the sword path were two sides of the same coin and were connected, there were still some differences. Thinking about it for a moment, Zhong Shou said seriously, I am not good at blade techniques, but if old brother who wants to improve on blade strength, I might be able to help. Only this method might be a little dangerous. Don't move. Just as Hu Zhongyuan was feeling surprised, Zhong Shou suddenly pulled out his sword, and then all around him were blade shadows. It was obviously a sword, but in his eyes it was a bright blade light. On the other hand, this half-demon youth seemed to have transformed into an enormous multicolored tiger that opened its bloody mouth and bit down. This sudden attack was not only without any signs, but it was also so quick that he couldn't react at all. Hu Zhongyuan instinctively wanted to gather up the true energy in his body, but he thought back to what Zhong Shou said before and hurriedly suppressed it. However, when the sky full of blade shadows swept over, he still felt a chill down his spine. He pretty much thought that Zhong Shou really wanted to take his life. When the blade light disappeared, only to see that there were dozens of tears on his clothes. At the center of his brows there was even a bloody wound. The other tears on his clothes were all caused by the sword energy. Only this wound was truly pierced by the sword tip. Hu Zhongyuan's eyes flashed with bewilderment. This blade is tiger roaring in all directions? It is the tiger roar that Uncle Hu used that day. After that battle, Zhong Shou had a deep impression of it and barely managed to learn it. Zhong Shou nodded his head and said seriously, if old brother Hu can do it within 3 days. You managed to break all the saber moves that I sent into your consciousness. Naturally, your martial path can improve. If not, you won't be able to improve for the rest of your life. I only hope that old brother won't blame me then. Only then did Hu Zhongyuan feel that something wasn't right. He suddenly felt that the Zhong Shou in front of him had transformed into a giant tiger and was roaring furiously. He obviously knew that this was an illusion, but his heart couldn't help but tremble. He instinctively wanted to pull out his blade. His forehead was instantly covered in cold sweat. He was both shocked and terrified. This prince's martial path talent was actually so strong. The tiger roar that his father had only used once was actually learned with just one look. He was even more worried about himself. If he couldn't break this blade's strength within 3 days, wouldn't he be stuck at this realm for the rest of his life? Then, he came to his senses. Since he cultivated the martial path, he should know the theory of martial cultivators being fearless. How could he not even have that bit of confidence? No matter how difficult it was, he had to try first. Speaking of which, during these few years, he had lived like a prince in Gantian Mountain City and held huge power in his hands. His sharpness had slowly decreased. Seeing Hu Zhongyuan focus, Zhong Shou nodded his head in praise. Suddenly, there was a loud roar that shook the wilderness. In just a moment, a black lion charged out from the forest. Zhong Shou casually tossed a pill to it and let it consume it. Then, he took out the black wave sword and started to display a set of sword techniques in front of the lion. It seemed illusionary yet not illusionary, hidden yet not hidden, like a mirage, like a blurry shadow. He didn't find it annoying, patiently practicing it over and over again. Until this rising moon lion's eyes slowly became clear. It gave out a grateful lion roar before charging into the forest in the distance. Only then did it stop. A smile instantly appeared on Zhong Shou's face. From start to finish, he only used it 7 times. This lion was indeed the intelligent type. Now that he had arranged everything here, what was next was to solve his own problem. Bringing some pills with him, Zhong Shou also took out some dry rations and placed them into his bag. Then, he directly took over 10 slightly larger wooden boards and made them into a wooden raft. He stepped on it and glided on the water surface. However, just as he slid 1,000 feet, he saw Chu Shui float out of the water with her body dripping wet. She shouted anxiously, "Young master, there is a frost serpent in the water fairy lake. Young master, come back quickly." Zhong Shou turned his head and took a look, but he didn't stop. He casually waved his sleeves to tell her not to worry, and his body suddenly sped up. The wooden raft under his feet also brought out a line of water as he sped towards the depths of the lake. In just a blink of an eye, he left Chu Shui behind. He thought to himself that if the two behind him knew that the place he was heading towards was close to where the frost serpent was sleeping, they would probably be so anxious that they would jump up and down. The area of the water fairy lake was huge, spanning 2,000 miles from north to south. Within it, there were thousands of islands and reefs of different sizes, densely packed within. The big ones were tens of miles, while the small ones were less than 100 feet. Zhong Shou followed his memory and used his true qi to control the wooden raft to glide in the lake. However, the water fairy lake 10,000 years ago was different from 10,000 years later. Some of them had already disappeared in the future. Some of the muddy sand islands had not formed yet. Zhong Shou searched for a long time in the lake before his eyes lit up. Then, he pretended to search for tens of larger islands in the lake before stepping on the wooden raft and directly charging onto one of them. It was a green island that was shaped like a giant axe. This place had a radius of 7 miles and was densely packed with bamboo forests. Zhong Shou wasn't interested in admiring it. His body was like lightning as he charged into the bamboo forest. In the next moment, a wide pool appeared in front of Zhong Shou. The water of the pool was deep black like ink. However, if one walked to the side of the pool and held it up to take a closer look, one would realize that the pool was actually extremely clear. When placed in one's mouth, it would taste even sweeter and more delicious. Everything was exactly the same as what he remembered. However, at this moment, the temperature of the spring water was slightly cold. Zhong Shou didn't find it strange. At this moment, the frost serpent hadn't turned into a dragon and left. He guessed that the island tens of miles away was still frozen. Chapter 159. Before the chill flood serpent turned into a dragon, it was born with Xian ice-cold power which was hard to control. Wherever it lived, 100 miles around it would become a country of frost. Apart from the water being slightly colder, the water being clearer, and the air being fresher, everything else was similar to 10,000 years in the future. In the future, a friend of his bought this place and made it a private island, changing the scenery. However, looking at it now, the natural scenery was much more beautiful. Looking around, Zhong Shou took out a few pills from his sleeves and consumed them, amongst which, he needed the body-cleansing pill. Next was the psychic mysterious sense pill that Xianyuan Iren gave him, as well as 2 types of pills known as the Yang Fire Body Warming Pill and the Turtle Breath Pill. The latter could help with breathing while the former had no other use, only allowing the body to feel as warm as fire for a few hours. Even among commoners it was really common. Especially in regions where the weather was colder, pretty much every family prepared it. In the end, after hesitating for a moment, Zhong Shou still swallowed a meridian spirit pill. When his body started to warm up, he took off his jacket. She took off her jacket, wearing only her underwear. She leaped into the air and fell into the lake. He dove down to a depth of 1,070 feet. He felt that there were undercurrents here. At this point, all the qi in his chest and abdomen had been completely exhausted. Luckily, using Little Gold and the spiritual vein pearl, he was now a fake pellet Xiantian. Using the foundation breathing pill, he was able to breathe in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He wasn't afraid of being suffocated to death. He continued to sink. Pretty much every 10 feet, Zhong Shou felt the pressure on his body get a little heavier. It was like he was carrying tens of thousands of kilograms of weight, about to crush his body. The undercurrent at the bottom of the pool also increased by a little, like a vast and irresistible force that continuously charged and collided with one another. Any one of them carried 10,000 kilograms of energy. The thousand-water lake was different from the other lakes in the cloud world. Although it looked calm on the surface, at the bottom of the lake, there were many undercurrents. The closer one got to the center of the lake, the more obvious it was. This black water lake seemed independent, but it was connected to the lake outside. It also had numerous undercurrents, maybe even more. However, the amount of spiritual energy here was the highest in the entire 1,000 miles apart from the place where the ice serpent lived. It's here. Suddenly, a stone platform with a radius of about 1,000 feet appeared in front of him. Zhong Shou's eyes lit up. He immediately turned his body and swam towards it. However, as soon as he stepped on it, he felt a vast undercurrent rushing towards him with an earth-shattering force. Zhong Shou, on the other hand, was not surprised. If they were not underwater, he would have burst out laughing. As expected, there weren't many changes between this place and 10,000 years later. No, the undercurrents of this era seemed to be even stronger. However, this situation was exactly what he wanted. He threw out a punch with all his might. Borrowing the strength of the external elixir, he directly shattered the water flow. Then, step by step, he stepped onto the stone and stood at the center of the stone. At this moment there was a huge pressure on his body. The bones in his body creaked, but the qi and blood in his body began to surge rapidly. Meanwhile, Zhong Shouxin felt as if lava was erupting inside him. He was burning hot and excited. In his previous life, it took him 3 years to break through the barriers from heaven with the help of the strong water pressure and many undercurrents here. However, in this era, using the essence of the lightning phoenix, the time could be shortened by 10 times. The effects of the meridian spirit pill also started to take effect. The meridians in his body slowly turned soft and started to twist in pain. Zhong Shou laughed, not bothering at all. He walked to the center of the stone platform and started to practice the energy leading technique that was specially used on the spiral meridians. Unlike normal times, at this moment, every action he completed underwater was several times harder than before. Under the water pressure, waving one's arms and legs required 10 times or even 100 times more strength than usual. Under the impact of the undercurrents, if one was not careful, one's actions would go out of shape. This caused his entire body to feel unbearable pain. Moments later, not only did the meridians in Zhong Shou's body start to twist, but all his blood, every inch of his flesh and bone started to burn. Not only because of the effects of the body-washing pill and yang fire body-warming pill, but also because Zhong Shou's actions had activated all the energy in his body. With the essence of the lightning phoenix, the feeling of cultivating underwater is really different from the last life. However, luckily it was Iren who refined this spirit-connecting mysterious sense pill. The effects of this pill were as Xianyuan Iren had said. Although it couldn't reduce the pain, it could allow one to maintain a clear mind. Zhong Shou was like that at this moment, which was why under the effects of the pill, his mind was extremely clear. However, at this moment, he would rather faint. It was as if his muscles and meridians were being bitten by man-eating ants inch by inch. It was almost challenging his limits. Luckily, this spirit-connecting mysterious sense pill also had the effect of increasing soul power. Using the intense pain to torture himself, the soul ocean whirlpool actually started to shrink once more. Bit by bit, his spiritual energy was slowly increasing. What made him happy was that under the catalysis of the body-washing pill, the Xiantian essence energy in his body was merging into his body at a shocking speed. Pretty much every moment, he could clearly feel that his body was becoming stronger. The meridians in his body were also becoming tougher. In the last life, when he cultivated to the peak of the 9th meridian of the bodily chakra realm, he was stopped by the barriers from heaven, unable to improve for a year and a half. At the depths of the water fairy lake, he continuously practiced various fist techniques as well as the first 3 sets of energy leading techniques that he had created. His thoughts at that time were really simple. Since the bodily chakra contained too little energy, it wasn't enough to break through the barriers from heaven. Then, he would continue to train to make his body stronger. He would make the chakra in his body tougher and wider until the true chi accumulated in all his meridians and acupoints was able to break the barriers from heaven. However, although he used some spiritual medicine to help, it couldn't compare to the Xiantian essence energy in his body now. Using this method to train his body consumed a huge amount of stamina, and it was pretty much the same as when he fought against experts like Li Yaling. In just 30 minutes, Zhong Shou was already panting. Luckily, although this place was underwater, if he was tired, he could stop and hide in a place where the undercurrents weren't strong enough to rest. His blood was boiling, and the accumulated Xiantian essence energy was slowly merging into his body. Little by little, the impurities were expelled out of his body through his pores. He didn't even need to use fetal breathing to maintain his body, and he didn't feel any pressure at all. A few hours later, the effects of the meridian spirit pill started to fade. Only then did Zhong Shou step on the stone and float to the surface. His body was sore and weak, and he couldn't muster up any strength. However, he still had the lightning traveling spirit bone, which could help him underwater. When he surfaced, he saw that it was already nighttime. The sun was setting in the west, and the afterglow shone in the evening. Great! Practicing the energy leading technique underwater. It is a full 5 times more than in the past. My physical strength has also increased. Although it can't be compared to the life potential that was ignited during the battle with Li Yaling and Hu Qianqiu. However, as long as it accumulates, in just 10 days I can win. Who knows, maybe in 3.5 to 4 months I can try to break through the barriers from heaven. At this moment, Zhong Shou's chakra realm was still extremely numb. The internal strength in his body was pretty much used up. He could only lie on the surface of the water without any strength. However, he was really happy, enjoying the comfort after the intense pain disappeared. He was delighted about the results of his training, and he recalled the days in his last life when he didn't bother about worldly matters and buried his head in training. Following which he thought back to Chu Shui, who should still be catching fish. With my current situation, I should be able to practice another round of fist techniques in the deep water of the lake. However, with Shui's personality, if she sees that I don't return, who knows how anxious she will be. With a thought, a talisman flew out from the clothes that Zhong Shou placed beside the lake. Zhong Shou casually took out some spiritual ink from his bag and wrote, "I am fine, I will return at midnight." Then, he folded it into a paper crane. He sighed to himself that spirit masters were sometimes more convenient than martial cultivators, and had many abilities. He also cast a spell, causing the paper crane to flap its wings and fly up high. After shaking for a moment, it swiftly flew towards the east. After eating a lot of dry rations, Zhong Shou totally collapsed on the surface of the water. It was like he had fallen asleep, only his breathing was still calm and regular. Who knows how long passed until the sun totally set. Zhong Shou only felt the energy in his body fill up once more. The numbness and soreness in his limbs and bones slowly disappeared. Zhong Shou suddenly opened his eyes, the world-shocking true energy slightly surging out. Within his chakra realm, several major acupoints were easily opened up. Once his entire body had changed, Zhong Shou dived into the water once more. In his last life, when he trained, he could only use special diving equipment. In this life, with the help of little gold and the external pill, as well as the Xiantian essence energy in his body, the effects weren't that great. Instead, he could stay underwater for a longer period of time. Actually, if he wanted to train underwater, he could train anywhere in this water fairy lake. However, only the strong spiritual energy in the lake could allow him to train his body to reach the best effect. Still 2,000 feet underwater, on the stone platform. This time, Zhong-Shou didn't use the Meridian Spirit Pill. He only used the Body Cleansing Pill and Foundation Breathing Pill before standing on the platform. This time, he didn't use the soft and gentle energy leading technique. Instead, he directly punched out under the water. It was a simple punch. The fist wasn't slow or fast, not rushed or impatient. It was really simple and didn't have any style, and there wasn't anything exquisite about it. However, when this fist was punched out, the undercurrent that had a pattern under the water suddenly started to move. Following which, Zhong-Shou's fist speed became faster and faster. Pretty much every strike was filled with all his strength. His internal strength surged and stirred up the water around him. In just a moment it was like a whirlpool was formed under the water, getting bigger and bigger as it swirled around endlessly. The speed of the undercurrent also increased by several times as it spun around. Chapter 160. Why aren't you letting me go? Today I am going to kill him. No, Sister Shuang, this person isn't in the wrong. He was the one who came to the pond first. He didn't know that we would come here and purposely peep. Scoff. He still deserves to die. Let me go. I can't let you go. Mother said that no matter how big the world is, it can't be bigger than logic. All living things in the world, even a blade of grass and a tree, have their own fate. It isn't easy for our race to survive, so we should understand others. The heavens have the virtue of caring for life, so we should have such a heart. We can't casually bully and kill others. I don't care. Henin, your brain has been spoiled by Mother. Today I, Yi Feishuang, will make this shameless person die without a burial place. Beside the black pond, the girl in the colorful dress waved the sword in her hand, trying to break free. The girl in the purple dress tightly hugged her waist, her face filled with helplessness. At this moment, Zhong-Shou didn't know what to say. His entire body went soft as he laid on the surface of the lake. However, the black wave sword that was placed on the other side of the shore resonated with his soul. As long as the girl in the colorful dress did something bad. With a thought, he could kill these two girls in front of him. Following which, the girl in the purple dress had an idea. Sister Shuang, look carefully. He is still a kid. His hair isn't even fully grown, so why are you angry? You are just being seen by a kid. Do you want to die? Aren't you afraid of people laughing at you? Woo, this kid is so cute. The young woman in multicolored clothes was stunned. She focused her gaze and looked carefully, and then a slightly embarrassed expression appeared on her pretty face. Her killing intent instantly disappeared as she put down the sword in her hand. When Zhong-Shou heard that, he was instantly furious. What did she mean by his hair wasn't fully grown? Even in this life, he was close to 14 years old. The elephant below had already started to show its prowess and was just waiting to be unsheathed. These two girls were really looking down on him. Killing intent rose up in his eyes. The black wave sword seemed to respond to his killing intent. It was ready to move. However, to do that, wasn't it a little too heartless? No matter what, he was the one who had seen her body. In the blink of an eye, he had ruthlessly destroyed a flower. It didn't seem right. It was too cruel and heartless. Forget it, I'll spare their lives. Zhong-Shou snorted as he wondered if he should push the two girls down and show them his masculinity. At the same time, he leisurely swam towards the shore and leisurely put on his coat that he had left by the shore. Yi Feishuang's face turned red again. Zhong-Shou's clothes were clearly here, but the two of them were careless and didn't notice it. She couldn't blame him. However, he was unwilling to admit that he was wrong. His face was still gloomy as he coldly snorted and said, "Why are you here? And why did you dive into the water? Tell me clearly." Zhong Shou smirked. The girl in colorful clothes probably didn't realize that she had just escaped from the death god's blade. He was too lazy to argue with this woman. He grabbed a few pieces of glowing jade in his hand and put them into his pouch. When the girl in purple saw that, her eyes lit up. "Jade Lake Stone? You're here to pick Jade Lake stones and sell them, right? I heard my mother say that these things are worth a lot outside. Are you a miner of the Water Fairy Lake? That's not right. I didn't see a boat outside. There is only a wooden raft." Her brows furrowed as she looked over with a pitiful gaze. "You don't even have a boat. Your family must be really poor, right? How pitiful." Zhong Shou was startled, only feeling that he couldn't wrap his head around it. He knew about miners, but most of them lived on the north side of the Water Fairy Lake, far away from the territory of the Chill Serpent. The Jade Lake stones in his hands were indeed worth a lot. The quality was really high and its price was comparable to a Grade 1 beast crystal. However, he casually picked them up to give them to Shui. Also, why did this girl see that he was pitiful? The clothes on his body were all made of golden silk. The patterns on his chest and abdomen were even more exquisite. In Donglin Cloud Continent, as long as one had some knowledge, they would be able to recognize that these were the robes produced by Yuhai City's Jinxiu Pavilion and knew that he had a noble identity. How did he get involved with those miners? Forget it, this girl was probably an idiot who didn't know much about the world. However, thinking about it, her sister would most probably know. She looked really strong and smart, and her experience wasn't something that her sister could compare to. Yi Feishuang sized him up, and then her expression cleared up as she kept her sword back into her sheath. "So that's the case. Sister is really careful. I misunderstood." Pausing, Yi Feishuang's pink face revealed a hint of warning. "However, you better forget about today's matter. If you tell anyone about this, I will definitely kill you with my own hands." When she said the word kill, her eyes were filled with killing intent. She grabbed the girl in purple and turned around to leave. Just as she was about to walk out of the bamboo forest, she hesitated for a moment, casually tossing a small bag over. "It is your fate that you were able to meet the two of us today. Take these mind stones and you should be able to live without worries. My mother said that miners are all pitiful people. Every time they search for Jade Lake stones, they often have to go 1,000 feet deep. You have no internal energy and it is too dangerous. It is best if you don't make a living from this." When the two of them totally disappeared from his field of vision, Zhong Shou looked at the bag in his hand, startled and in a daze. 30 Grade 2 Mind Stones, 10 Grade 3, this Yi Feishuang really spent a lot. However, with these Mind Stones, not to mention living without worries, even if one was rich, having a good meal and having a bunch of servants, it would still be easy. How much common sense did this Yi Feishuang have to say such words? So many mind stones, and she gave it to a kid who had no fighting ability. Wasn't she afraid that others would have bad intentions and harm his life? Wait, maybe this Yi Feishuang didn't want to directly attack him in front of her sister, which was why she used such a method to borrow a knife to kill him. How vicious! Thinking about it, he roughly understood what Yi Feishuang was thinking. Zhong Shou scoffed coldly, tossing the bag in his hand to the side before sitting down beside the pond. He breathed in and adjusted his breathing, allowing his stamina and true qi to recover slightly. Zhong Shou also leaped towards the shore. He drove the wooden raft back to where he came from. When he returned to the shore where he temporarily stayed, it was around midnight. However, Chu Shui was already really anxious. She had even prepared the wooden raft and was prepared to head to the lake with Hu Zhongyuan to search for him. When she thought about Zhong Shou, Chu Shui immediately burst into tears, looking really sad. Only when Zhong Shou took out those few shining Jade Lake stones did her tears turn into a smile. The night was silent. When the morning of the second day arrived, Zhong Shou drove the wooden raft back to the small island. As he had already consumed the meridian spirit pill yesterday, he needed to wait a few days for his meridians to relax before he could use the pill again, which was why Zhong Shou directly started to use the chaotic cloak fist technique, turning the water into a whirlpool. He continued for 4 hours until his internal breathing technique couldn't be maintained anymore. Zhong Shou once again floated up to the surface of the water. It was already noon, and to completely change his breathing and recover his stamina, he would need at least 4 to 4 hours. Zhong Shou only felt hungry, using up a lot of stamina. He casually took out some dry rations to eat. A moment later, he felt really bored. The dry rations of this era are really disgusting. It's okay to eat it once or twice, but if I eat it for 8 to 10 days, how can I take it? I will have to stay here for 4 to 5 months. In his last life, he loved to enjoy life. He would never get tired of eating good food and not get tired of the details. To satisfy his taste buds, he trained up a set of skills that could be compared to Top Chef. Now that he had such a thought, since he had nothing to do anyway, he used his mind to control the black wave sword and pierced into the giant lake in the distance. In just a short while, he had already killed a few fish and dragged them back. When he was in front of them, he took a closer look. Zhong Shou couldn't help but feel delighted. Every one of them was tens of kilograms in size, extremely fat and strong. Moreover, they were the snow carp that had been hunted to extinction in the future. Today is such a good day. Such a big snow carp, won't it be sold for a sky-high price in the future? This entire water fairy lake is the hunting ground of the ice serpent. Rumors say that it sometimes doesn't even have enough to eat and needs to go out to hunt. Looking at the situation, it seems like it has already fallen asleep. It hasn't hunted for over 10 years, and it has grown strong. What a lucky day for me. He cleanly cut open the bellies of these few fish and threw away the organs. The gills and the like were also cut off. After carefully cleaning it, Zhong Shou started a fire. There were bamboo trees here, and Zhong Shou's spells were the best at setting fires. In just a short while, the flames were blazing. After skewering a few fish, he placed them on top of the fire. Zhong Shou was really excited as he flipped them around. Just as the smell of barbecued fish started to spread out, a purple light flashed. Suddenly, a purple shadow flashed in front of his eyes. A girl in purple suddenly jumped in front of him. She giggled and said, "So it was you who started the fire? You haven't left? This fish smells so good." As she spoke, the purple-dressed girl's nose twitched from time to time. Her eyes lit up as she looked at the fish on the fire, nearly drooling. Then, she looked at him with a pitiful and begging expression. Zhong Shou couldn't help but smile, thinking back to Chu Shui. This girl was similar to Shui, both pure, dumb, and gluttonous. Thinking that since he couldn't finish it, Zhong Shou scattered some salt and spices, taking down a cooked fish and casually tossing it over. The purple-dressed girl didn't mind that it was hot, biting into it right away. Her eyes burned as she praised, "This fish is so fresh. Why did it melt in my mouth? This is the first time I ate such a barbecued fish." "Oh right, I am Yi Feiyan, what is your name?" Zhong Shou's eyes instantly rippled. A moment later, it was silent once more. Yi Feishuang, Yi Feiyan, these two names were a little familiar when put together, but he couldn't remember. He searched his mind for a long time but couldn't find any clues. He gave out a self-mocking laugh, his eyes flashing, "I am Zhong Shou." Chapter 161. Zhong Shou. Yi Feiyan used her fingers to scratch her cheeks like she was really troubled. "So hard to remember, I will call you Brother Shou. Also, the surname Zhong is really weird. Oh, it seems a little familiar." Zhong Shou smiled and didn't say anything. The seven-tailed sky fox Zhong family, at least in this era, was really famous. They were one of the few strong races in the monster race. It wasn't surprising that this girl had heard of them. However, was Zhong Shou's name really that hard to remember? Yi Feian didn't feel troubled after a short while, and continued to eat the fish. Her mouth was really small, the same as Chu Shui's. Even if she opened her mouth wide, she could only swallow a small piece. However, her speed was really quick. In the blink of an eye, the snow carp in her hand was only left with bones. Then, she looked at Zhong Shou with her eyes wide open. Zhong Shou was helpless and tossed another barbecued fish over. The two of them ate the few snow carps in just a few bites. Then, they stared at each other beside the fire. Zhong Shou was thinking about when this girl would be willing to leave. Suddenly, he saw 2 streams of tears flow down her cheeks. He panicked and didn't know what to do. He also didn't know how he made her cry. Then, he heard her sob, "Brother Shou, you are a good person. I haven't eaten such delicious fish in a long time. So touching, it is even better than the fish my mother barbecued." Zhong Shou couldn't help but feel annoyed. It was just barbecued fish, was that worth crying over? The Yi family sisters were both 8 Meridian mythic masters and had huge amounts of money. Where couldn't they eat good fish and meat? Yi Feian cried for a while before retracting her tears. However, her expression was still really pitiful. "Brother Shou, can you help me barbecue a few more fish? Feian still wants to eat. There is also sister who hasn't eaten. Sister is also pitiful. She worked hard for an entire day and in the end, the fish was burnt." When he heard that, Zhong Shou was helpless. "What does it have to do with me if you don't have grilled fish to eat?" However, with his temper, he was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. What he hated the most was seeing a girl cry. Thinking that since it was still early, there was still more than an hour to recover his strength, he nodded his head. Yi Feian was delighted. "Brother Shou, you really are a good person." After she said that, she disappeared into the bamboo forest. Zhong Shou was left standing beside the bonfire with a stiff face. The word "good person" was not something that people liked in the future. He did not want to be a good person. That Yi Feian left for about 15 minutes before rushing back. Her figure was swift, but on her slender and thin arms, she was actually carrying 6 large fiery red fish as she soared over. Each of them weighed more than 100 kilograms. Yi Feian didn't feel heavy at all. She stood in front of Zhong Shou and didn't even need to take a breath. She just smiled embarrassedly. Zhong Shou's eyes narrowed. "This is a blood flame fish? Where did you catch it from?" Then, his gaze inadvertently paused on Yi Feian's hair for a moment. One could faintly see that there was a small white horn hidden in her hair. The blood flame fish was extremely precious. In terms of taste, it was on the same level as the snow carp. However, its blood was extremely precious. Dozens of spiritual pills in the world used it as the main ingredient. Even the human pinnacle pill needed the blood of this blood flame fish. However, the place where this kind of fish lived was usually in places where extreme cold and extreme heat intersected. They liked cold environments but needed to be in extremely hot places to absorb fire to go against the cold. Nearby, there were a few places where the blood flame fish gathered. However, without exception, there was a chance that the chill serpent would be alerted. Yi Feian was not scheming at all, shaking her head. "I don't know. I caught it a few miles away. Sister Han said that there was an underground fire hole, and she didn't allow me to get close. However, there were many of them there." Zhong Shou's expression relaxed, thinking that if he had the time, he could go and take a look. The way to deal with the blood flame fish was different. Zhong Shou first chose one, carefully scraping off the skin and making it into a temporary bag. Following which, he let out the blood of a few blood flame fish. They were all of fiery red color like a jumping flame. He added in some medicinal powder and shook it lightly, causing the powder to spread in. After this step was completed, he cut open the stomach and cleaned it. Using a fist-sized bamboo pole, he placed it on top of the fire. Zhong Shou moved while asking casually, "Then do you and your sister live here?" You seem really familiar with this place? Yi Feiyan shook her head. No. We just arrived the day before yesterday. Sister Shuang and I have only been here for 4 days. We listened to our mother and came here to seek shelter from an elder. However, that elder is no longer here. Oh right, Sister Shuang is called Yi Feishuang. Don't look at her temper, she is actually a good person. Her face is hard but her heart is soft. Zhong Shoxin smiled. He could also see some things. When he heard that the two of them didn't live here for long, he was at ease. Following which he asked, You seem to have horns on your head, are you from the monster race? Yi Feiyan rubbed the top of her head, a strange look flashing in her eyes. She then chuckled and said, You can say that. Mother didn't tell me that humans don't have horns? Wouldn't they be ugly? Only with horns would they look good. Zhong Shou was speechless. Did this Yi Feiyan not even see what a human looked like? So, in Yi Feiyan's eyes, he was really ugly? However, he was at ease. This girl shouldn't have anything to do with the chill serpent. He also felt weird. Which branch of the monster race with horns on their heads was it? He didn't have any relevant information in his mind. In just a short while, Zhong Shou managed to get a lot of information out of the innocent brat's mouth. These two girls were twin sisters. They seemed to have lived on a small island in the past. However, it wasn't the water fairy lake. It was said that their mother was really strong, able to call the wind and summon the rain. However, as for how strong she was, Yi Feiyan wasn't sure. It seemed like they had recently met a really fierce person, which was why they were forced to separate from their mother and escape here. As for the reason, Yi Feiyan seemed to have been specially instructed by someone, so she wasn't willing to say it out loud. Zhong Shou tried to get some information out of her, but seeing that it didn't work, he didn't bother much. He, Sword Emperor Tan Qiu, wasn't so shameless to the point that he wanted to target these two girls. He specially asked about these things just to clarify the possible relationship between the two of them and the chill serpent. The blood flame fish was slowly being cooked. Yi Feiyan's gaze became more and more infatuated, drooling. Brother Shou, let me tell you secretly. Don't tell anyone else. Actually, after sister went back yesterday, she cried. She said that her culinary skills weren't good, and that someone saw her naked, and that she wouldn't be able to get married in the future. I joked that why don't sister just marry Brother Shou? Anyways, Brother Shou is really good looking. However, sister scolded me and said that you don't know martial arts and don't cultivate spells, so what's the point of being good looking? She also said that you are an idiot. I feel that it is quite good, but I don't understand. Why don't Brother Shou marry me? I know how to do anything, I even know how to fight with people. As long as you grill fish for me every day. Zhong Shou touched his head. So he didn't have horns. In the eyes of this girl, he was still the kind that looked really good. Just as she said that, a cold scoff spread out from the direction of the bamboo forest. Sister Han, what nonsense are you saying? I told you to focus on cultivating spells, so why did you run here? Yi Feiyan was frightened and turned her head. She saw Yi Feishuang standing outside of the bamboo forest with a cold expression, her face flushed red. She seemed to be furious, but she didn't dare to look at Samarim in the eye, forcing herself to say coldly, Why haven't you left? Didn't you say that it is dangerous to harvest Jade Lake stones, and if you aren't careful you will lose your life? Don't come here in the future. Yi Feiyan giggled, not bothering about her sister's words. She carried a grilled fish and ran over, moving close to Yi Feishuang's lips. Sister, have a taste. Brother Shou is not only a good person, but his grilling skills are comparable to mother's. Yi Feishuang frowned. Seeing that the fish was forced to her mouth, she unwillingly opened her lips and bit it. Her eyes lit up as she looked at Zhong Shou with a weird expression. Following which she scoffed coldly, tilting her head to the side. Sister, don't forget that we don't know if mother is dead or alive. If something happens to her, what should we do in the future? If uncle doesn't succeed this time, We will have to rely on ourselves to take revenge for Mother. Sister, how can you be so lazy? If you still have the slightest bit of ambition, you should be 10 times more furious than before. Yi Feishuang's voice suddenly paused, her eyes fixed on a bag beside the pond. Her brows furrowed. I know that in the human race, some people are proud and don't like to accept charity from others. However, having a backbone is a good thing. But for trash like you who doesn't cultivate, what right do you have to be arrogant? Harvesting stones is dangerous, so why don't you think about your family? If anything happens, do you know that your family will be sad for you? After scolding the two of them, Yi Feishuang left with a cold expression on her face. Yi Feiyan's eyes were filled with tears, and she tried her best not to let them fall. Looking at Yi Feishuang's back view and then at the fish, after hesitating for a moment, she picked up 3 more blood-flame fish and chased after them. Zhong Shou laughed, not bothering at all as he looked at the fire. This Yi Feiyan still had some conscience and didn't take all the fish away. He swallowed them all into his stomach in a few mouthfuls. Zhong Shou went to take the fish blood that was placed at the side. Due to the medicinal powder, the fish blood hadn't solidified, and a strong fishy smell instantly assaulted his nostrils. Zhong Shou frowned slightly, but he gritted his teeth and swallowed it all. Although the fish blood was fishy, it was delicious when it entered his mouth. The moment it entered his stomach, he felt his entire body suddenly become unbearably hot. He wished he could tear his clothes apart. Zhong Shou took off his outer clothes once more, jumping into the black pond. Only then did he feel slightly comfortable. Chapter 162. Once again diving into the deep water, even if he was surrounded by ice-cold water, Zhong Shou still felt unbearably hot. Without needing to punch, the pores on his skin excreted sweat. It was a jet-black color, as thick as ink. This was the effect of the blood flame fish, to remove the impurities in one's body and strengthen one's body. The blood of 600 kilograms of blood flame fish was comparable to a grade 2 spiritual pill, or even better. However, when Zhong Shou stood on the stone platform, he didn't train. Instead, he held the grade 2 lightning tooth sword and waved it around in the water. The chaotic splitting wind fist only needed to be slightly modified and it would become a set of chaotic splitting wind sword technique. Similarly, it caused the water to ripple and the currents to surge. A giant whirlpool slowly formed under the water. He didn't care about the consequences, causing it to become bigger and bigger, several times bigger than when he was training. Zhong Shou didn't stand at the center of the whirlpool like a fool. Instead, he held the lightning tooth sword in his hand and walked around in the whirlpool. He actually started to train his movement techniques and sword techniques within the whirlpool. The footwork was really normal, just the most basic ones. However, when he used them, there were thousands of changes. He accurately dodged the current. Sword techniques were the same. At this moment, Zhong Shou wasn't restricted by those basic sword attacks. During those 13 years, all the sword techniques in Zhong Shou's memory, as well as the exquisite sword techniques he had seen on the way from Gantian Mountain, were all used by him one by one. Every stab of the sword was executed by a hair's breadth, meeting the attack head-on, or completely shattering the most tyrannical and shocking undercurrent, or causing the whirlpool to become more and more chaotic and vast. Gradually, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the vicinity began to swirl around him along with his sword. In his last life, his unparalleled speed and precision, the sword that was good at fighting between life and death, was trained through such a method. Not only was his sword technique invincible, but his movement techniques were also among the top few people in the world before he reached the ascended realm. 30 minutes later, Zhong Shou couldn't take it anymore. The sword in his hand slowed down slightly, causing the violent whirlpool to slow down. Zhong Shou raised his eyebrows slightly. My body chakra stage world-shocking spiritual art is almost complete. There were many flaws that needed to be perfected in the future. However, even though this chi cultivation technique is complete, there is no matching heart cultivation technique, sword incantation, and all sorts of matching fighting technique. This is really annoying. Zhong Shou felt a headache coming on. There were more than 1,000 swordsmanship and cultivation methods in his head. However, no matter what kind of method it was somewhat unsatisfactory to use it to activate this spiral force. When he used the exquisite sword techniques in his memory, there were always some obscure and difficult parts. After all, not every sword technique was like the Styx River Death Sword, which could perfectly fuse with any cultivation technique or chi cultivation technique. Thinking of this, Zhong Shou could not help but sigh in his heart. He knew that he would probably have to put in more effort. Since he had already created this world-shocking spiritual art, then the matching heart cultivation technique and sword incantation naturally couldn't be lacking. With that thought in mind, Zhong Shou's sword technique changed once more. It was even slower, and his main focus changed from training the sword to practicing. His brain was spinning at high speed, thinking about how to structure a brand new sword technique. Unknowingly, he was totally focused. In the next few days, Zhong Shou's whereabouts were fixed. Every morning, he would rush to the Black Pond. Every day, he would train his fist twice and sword once. Each time, he would train for 4 hours. Only at midnight did he return to the shore of the lake to rest. However, on the 4th day, Yi Feiyan, who had left with her sister, appeared in front of him once more. However, this time, there was Yi Feishuang beside her. The former was trying to get on his good side, while the latter's face was flushed red. She hesitated for a long while before saying with a stiff face, "Can we ask little brother to prepare some food for us every day? Anything is fine." After saying that, she was afraid that Zhong Shou wouldn't agree. She placed a grade 3 mind stone in front of Zhong Shou, and her voice became louder, as if it was a matter of course. "I will give you a reward, and you will cook for us. 1-for-1 meal. I know that this mind stone is very expensive in your city." Who knows if it was a coincidence, but when the mind stone was placed down, Yi Feishuang's stomach started to growl. Yi Feiyan also had a tearful face, her hands clasped together as she begged, "Little brother Shou, sister and I haven't eaten in 2 days. Little brother Shou, you are a good person, you will definitely help us, right? Sister and I are so useless, the food we make can't be eaten. We are about to starve to death." Yi Feishuang was even more embarrassed, and she didn't dare to look at Zhong Shou in the eye. Zhong Shou's face was really weird. Be it his identity as the Gantian Mountain Prince or the Sword Emperor Tan Qiu in the last life, he didn't need to be a chef for others, right? Thinking about it carefully, Zhong Shou sighed. Since he had nothing to do, it would be good to hook up with these 2 sisters when he was free. Thus, he kept the grade 3 mind stone in his sleeves with a clear conscience. Before this, he wasn't willing to accept the bag of mind stones, but this one, he had a clear conscience. In the last life, if other people wanted to invite him, a sword emperor-level master who was close to the peak of cooking, to show off his cooking skills, he would have to pay at least a grade 3 mind stone. The appearance fee was at least 1 7th grade spirit stone, and the price of the ingredients needed to be calculated separately. Accepting such a small grade 3 mind stone was already a bargain for these 2 sisters. Seeing Yi Feishuang's tight expression relax, Zhong Shou smiled. Zhong Shou couldn't help but laugh, and he started to light up the fire once more. The ingredients were all captured by the 2 sisters, and Zhong Shou was only in charge of handling them. Unfortunately, he didn't have any other tools on him, and could only barbecue. However, he was pleasantly surprised by the ingredients that the 2 sisters had brought. It wasn't just fish. Who knew where they caught 2 golden blood pythons from? This made Zhong Shou's eyes light up. They had other flavors. At least during this period of time, he wouldn't be choked to death by the smell of fish. The following days were still the same. However, every afternoon or evening, there would be 2 more girls who would come over to eat and drink. They weren't really there to eat, but they counted the money. Occasionally, when Yi Feishuang felt really satisfied, she would happily tip him 3 to 5 mind stones. They were all grade 3, extremely pure and exquisite. However, this Yi Feishuang seemed to be really thrifty. Every time, she would hesitate, afraid that she would give too much. This made Zhong Shou laugh so hard that his stomach hurt. Yi Feishuang was cold and arrogant, and she thought that she was smart. She seemed to be wary of Zhong Shou. As the elder sister, she took good care of her younger sister. Yi Feiyan's personality was really pure, and her words were direct. She wasn't scheming at all, and she didn't hide anything. With these 2 girls accompanying him and occasionally chatting, Zhong Shou actually didn't feel bored while cultivating. In his heart, he was filled with emotions. In the past, when he was tired from cultivating, he could only chat with girls on the internet to relieve his boredom. How could he be like now, with 2 extremely beautiful and alluring sisters by his side, making him feel so refreshed? His mood was good, and even his daily cultivation progress seemed to have become much faster. In just a short 20 days, he had opened up all his outer chakra meridian acupoints. When all 480 acupoints in his body were opened up and he reached the peak, the vast energy within Zhong Shou's meridians instantly surged. They spontaneously rushed towards the 2 earth gates beneath their feet. However, just as it charged halfway, it was forcefully suppressed by Zhong Shou. He knew that at this moment, his 20-odd days of body tempering had caused the meridians in his body to become much tougher and wider. Along with his dual meridian body, the amount of true qi he could store was 3 times that of normal peak 9 meridian mythic masters. However, he was still far from opening the earth gate. Even if he tried now, it would be useless. He remembered that in his last life, he had accumulated 5 times that of normal people. Along with the Styx death sword intent that he comprehended, as well as a soft barrier pill, he was able to forcefully break through the barriers from heaven. At this moment, he was not far from that stage. Now that he was suppressing it, he was prepared to break it open in one go and not lose his sharpness. At this moment, Zhong Shou's skin was slowly solidifying, forming a layer of hard skin that stuck to his body. He was using it to resist the strong water pressure and the ripping force of the centrifugal force. His organs, bones, and tendons were all extremely tough. Even if he stood in the whirlpool and took it head-on, he would be unharmed. However, at this moment, Zhong Shou increased the speed of the chaotic cape fist technique, causing the speed of the whirlpool to double. After that, every 10 days, it would increase by several times. In a short 60-odd days, the hard skin started to fall off once more. The skin that was revealed looked young and tender, no different from that of a normal 14-year-old kid. However, at this moment, Zhong Shou casually punched out, and the water below would shake. Now that I don't use external strength, my fist can reach 25,000 kilograms. It is not much different from someone who just entered Xiantian. With this speed, in just a few days, I can try to break through the barriers from heaven. His heart filled with joy, Zhong Shou's fist speed became even faster. Not only the water, but even the spiritual energy started to form a storm. The entire bottom of the water was filled with caves and rock. Numerous pieces of stone fell down. At this moment, if one looked from outside of the pool, one could see that 2,000 feet below the surface of the pool, a giant whirlpool was forming. At the end of his training, Zhong Shou was too lazy to bother about the chaos below, directly jumping out of the pool. He opened his hand, and a ball of fire and water suddenly appeared in his palm. Samurai couldn't help but feel even more satisfied. Although the 10/meridian spirit pills didn't cause his meridians to completely turn into a spiral shape, he could at least use half of his strength. This meant that he was able to use close to 60% of his strength, which was close to 20% of a normal person's strength. In terms of stamina, it also increased by a lot. At least it wasn't like before, where he needed to pant after walking a few steps. Now, he would only pant after walking tens of steps. Although it was still very weak, there was a difference in quality. I already have an idea of the sword technique that is to be used together with it. With the heaven whirlpool energy as a precedent, it will be easy. However, once I break through the Xiantian barriers, I will need to merge the earth veins into my body. Chu Shui is close to cultivating the first meridian of the earth chakra level. Speaking of which, it is time for me to prepare to gather suitable earth veins. Chapter 163. Merging the earth veins into the body was different from the spiritual veins in the external pill. All external pills were made of either metal or stone. Even if they were broken, it was okay. To pursue strength, naturally the purer the better. To merge the earth veins into the 9 meridians of the bodily chakra, one needed to have the 5 elements and couldn't cause the 5 elements to be out of balance. One could only focus on 1 or 2 elements due to different cultivation method. Which was why, although there were endless spiritual veins in the world, there were very few suitable for Xiantian cultivators. In the future, not only did spiritual energy weaken, even spiritual veins suitable for martial cultivation were rare. Who knows who invented a spirit mixing technique that could adjust the source of spiritual energy in the spiritual veins, which solved the problem of Xiantian cultivators. However, this technique was really harsh. Moreover, the spiritual veins after being adjusted were far from natural ones, which was why Zhong Shou wasn't prepared to use it. Even if he didn't use the spirit mixing technique, he had his own secret techniques in terms of searching for spiritual veins. There were a few other methods to strengthen earth veins that didn't exist in this era. Zhong Shou was eager to try them out. These few methods weren't of much help, at most increasing strength by 10 to 20%. However, the so-called martial path experts relied on such accumulations to slowly surpass others. Sometimes, a small difference in strength could decide the life and death of a battle. How annoying, with those 2 following behind. It is really inconvenient for me to do anything. Now that I am at the nest of the chill serpent, they shouldn't follow me, right? Although the chill serpent hadn't successfully transformed into a dragon, in terms of grade, it was half a step into the celestial realm. Moreover, it was the type of dual cultivator which was the hardest to fight. Experts of this realm all had a strong connection with one another. Moreover, it was currently sleeping and accumulating energy, which was a sensitive time. If Yen Fan and Shui Lingbo got close, and there was a misunderstanding, it might be the first spiritual grandmaster level battle since the Cloud Desolate era. However, with Taiyuan Fairy's personality, she might not even bother about all this. Luckily, I got that thing when I killed Mingjue, so this matter isn't hard to solve. That's right, there's also the soul cultivation technique. That's the most pressing issue. Just a month ago, Zhong Shou had condensed the fire talisman. In his Sea of Soul, he had finally gathered 3 genuine talismans and reached the out-of-aperture realm. Regardless of whether it was the strength of his soul power or the purity of his soul consciousness, no matter how one looked at it, he could already be considered a true night roaming realm spirit master. His progress could be said to be godly, surpassing his own martial arts by more than 1 level. It was a gap of 2 completely different realms. However, Zhong Shou also knew in his heart that it would not be so easy to increase his spirit master cultivation in the future. He was able to form the lightning and water talismans so quickly. This was because his body had the origin marks of the lightning luan and the 7-tailed sky fox. The other fire true talisman also came from the other half of his bloodline. Although the other half of his bloodline was still dormant, it was of great help to him. Compared to the lightning and water talismans, It only took 1.5 months more. After which, even if he was a talisman grandmaster and knew the profoundness of the god talismans, it would be tough for him to continue at such a high speed. For example, in the month after the Fire True Talisman was formed, he went all out and was only able to form 9 true talismans. Who knows how long it would take to form the next one? At this time, he felt more and more how important the soul cultivation technique was. Sitting beside the shore, Zhong Shou was in deep thought. Only when he heard a rustling sound did he come back to his senses. Turning his head and looking out, as expected, it was Yi Feishuang and Yi Feiyan. In their hands they each carried some ingredient. Not only the aquatic products in the lake, but there were also beasts on land as well as some wild vegetables. They were all tied together with vines. Samuraim's gaze stopped on the 100-kilogram fish in Yi Feiyan's left hand, laughing. "Why is it blood flame fish again? Little Sister Han, do you like to eat it so much?" "Call me Sister Henin." Yi Feiyan scoffed, pouting. "I don't like it either, I'm sick of it." However, Sister Shuang said that Zhong Shou, you have to go into the water every day and your body is infected by the cold energy. You need to eat the blood of this blood flame fish to warm up your body. Not only can it chase away the cold, but it can also strengthen your body. Zhong Shou was shocked, looking closely at Yi Feishuang, only to see that her expression was as cold as usual, only her eyes were slightly off. He couldn't help but find it amusing. These 2 sisters had been with him for 3 months. Did they still think that he was some kind of stone miner? During these few months, when did they see him pick such a stone? Shaking his head, Zhong Shou laughed. "So you are sick of eating this fish? Okay, let's eat something fresh today, let's eat some stone plate barbecue." Yi Feiyan was instantly energized, a look of anticipation appearing on her face. Zhong Shou first raised up a fire, following which he placed a clean flat stone plate on the fire. After roasting it until it was hot, he placed a thin slice of fish on it. Not long later, the aroma spread out. Yi Feiyan didn't wait for the meat to be cooked before she placed one into her mouth, her eyes shining. "Delicious! Oh, it tastes different from barbecued fish." Yi Feishuang's appetite was also roused, picking up a slice and eating it. Her eyes were filled with praise, but she didn't say anything. Zhong Shou was also eating happily, and he started to talk nonsense. While eating, he bragged and talked nonsense, making Yi Feiyan feel surprised. "Brother Shou, you didn't lie to me? Is this world really a tenth of the size of our Donglin Cloud world?" Yi Feiyan's eyes were filled with shock, her gaze towards Zhong Shou slowly filled with worship. "Brother Shou, you really know a lot. In the future, I will definitely go and take a look. Such a big ship should be able to fit many people, right?" Zhong Shou acknowledged, only feeling that his bones were much lighter. "This is just the small ones. The biggest ship is comparable to the entire cloud world. There is a womanland built on the ship." "Womanland?" Yi Feiyan was curious, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Are they really all women in that country?" Zhong Shou nodded his head, sighing. "It is said that they don't need men to give birth. Moreover, they are all as beautiful as flowers, like fairies descending from the heavens. Unfortunately, they can only mate with women. What a waste of resources." Yi Feiyan's eyes lit up, the yearning in her eyes getting thicker and thicker. She didn't really understand what he meant by waste of resources. Yi Feishuang's face was cold, but her ears couldn't help but prick up like she was listening. Only when she saw Zhong Shou looking over with a smile did she turn her head. "I am just bragging. I know about this world, but I have never heard any rumors about a womanland. A giant ship can compare to the cloud world? What a fantasy!" Zhong Shou couldn't help but grin. Although his words were a little exaggerated, they were all true. He was like a frog at the bottom of a well who didn't know how vast the world was. Following which Yi Feiyan opened her mouth. "Sister, that giant ship might not be real. Wasn't there a big ship among the things that Mother gave us? I heard that when one opens it after reaching the day-wandering realm, It is 300,000 feet wide. Before she finished, Yi Feishuang had already revealed an annoyed expression. Shut up. How can you casually say such words in front of others? Brother Shou isn't an outsider. Why can't I say it? Yi Feiyan pouted unhappily, but she didn't continue speaking. She revealed a sad expression. Brother Shou, I will be leaving in a few days. Sister said that we can't stay here for long. Uncle might not be able to help us now. Those few bad people might have already found their way here, so we can only stay here for a few more days. Zhong Shou was thinking about what grade of treasure ship it was, to actually be 300,000 feet wide when it was opened up. What was the identity of the mother of the two sisters to be so terrifying? When he heard that, he smiled once more. What bad people? Do you want me to help you kill them? A purple glow flashed in his eyes, his lips curled up, revealing an evil intent. He had recently changed out of the Black Wave sword and had switched to the Grade 2 Lightning Tooth sword. He lacked people to sacrifice to the sword. Yi Feiyan's expression was obviously startled. Yi Feishuang directly scolded. Even if you joke, there should be a limit. To you, Zhong Shou, naturally it has nothing to do with you. But to us sisters, it concerns life and death. Do you think it is funny to say such words? The few people chasing us are all Xiantian masters. With one finger, they can crush an ant like you. They aren't food that you can casually slaughter. After saying that, she suddenly stood up. Also, you need to pay attention to yourself. Those few people don't even blink when they kill. Who knows, they might drag you down. In these few days, it is best if you leave this place and don't come back. I am full. Seeing Yi Feishuang leave after saying that, Yi Feiyan's face was filled with helplessness. She smiled embarrassedly at Zhong Shou and chased after them once more. Zhong Shou didn't care, smiling as he looked on as the two girls disappeared from his field of vision. Xiantian masters? He had thought that the person who was chasing after the two sisters would be even stronger than them. Then, he sighed. The ancients said that treasures were a sin. It really made sense. At this moment, even he couldn't help but be tempted. It wasn't that he really wanted to kill them to steal their treasures, as he couldn't do that. He just wanted to see what the 300,000 feet ship looked like. Such a treasure ship might be able to break open the world barrier and enter another world. He looked around and was filled with emotions. Unknowingly, another 3 months had passed. Speaking of which, he only had a few days left here. Who knows what the situation at Gantian Mountain was like? How was Xianyuan Iren, that little girl, doing in Cloud Saint City? During these few days, he actually missed her a little. Laughing, Zhong Shou stood up once more. He couldn't wait to sink into the pond once more. At this moment, trying his best to break through to Xiantian was the most important thing. He could already feel that the dragon-like energy in his body was getting harder and harder to suppress. The two earth gates under his feet were showing signs of loosening. At most, in 6 days, he could try to break through to Xiantian. Chapter 164. Although Xian Mountain City was called a mountain city, it was built on flat land. On the left was a river, on the right was a majestic mountain. There were tens of thousands of miles of fertile land. The terrain was like that of a dragon and a tiger. 50 miles around the city were 400 feet high walls, 32 feet thick. 4 carriages could pass side by side. They were all made up of astral stone and supported by spiritual formations. Looking out from tens of miles away, one could feel a vast and majestic aura surging over, like it was impregnable. Xianyuan Iren was standing on a 9-story building, leaning on the railing and looking out towards the city walls. However, what she was looking at wasn't the high walls, but the further southeast side. She hated that the wall was too high, blocking her line of sight such that she couldn't see further. It has already been 3 months and you still aren't willing to change your mind? 40 feet away from the wooden railing, there was a 40-year-old lady with tens of female attendants following behind her. At this moment, her face was filled with rage. You should be clear about what kind of person that Zhong Shou is. A dual meridian body trash who can't cultivate. Is he worth you doing this? Iren, you are going to ruin your life. Xianyuan Iren didn't reply, her lips curling up. Naturally, she was the clearest about what kind of person Zhong Shou was. If it wasn't for her rushing to Cloud Saint City a few months ago, she would have thought that he couldn't cultivate and she would have been kept in the dark by him. A few days ago, when she heard her mother say those words, she had the heart to argue with her. Only when she thought about what Hu Qianqiu said did she bear with it. Recently, she was too lazy to even raise such a thought. She roughly understood Zhong Shou's thoughts at that time. Such a person naturally had the pride of an expert. He didn't bother to argue and wasn't willing to prove anything. He did what he wanted, so why would he care about what other people thought? During this month of time, that person looked at her like he was looking at a joke. How annoying. However, the most delightful thing about this trip east wasn't the strong sword path of that person, nor was it the out-of-body realm spirit master cultivation. Instead, it was his personality that made people happy. It's all your father's fault. He has led you astray. He always talks about benevolence and righteousness, and set up this damned engagement. What kind of bullshit benevolence and righteousness is this? Can it be eaten? The middle-aged lady's demeanor was elegant, cold, and dignified, but the words she spoke were incomparably vulgar, with a hint of disappointment. However, when he saw that Xianyuan Iren didn't care about him at all, looking into the distance in a daze. But for some reason, he felt a little guilty. Was she really persevering for her own morals? No matter how he looked at it, she looked like a little girl who was thinking of a man. Rolling her eyes, the middle-aged lady's tone changed again. Didn't you always say that if you want to marry someone, you should marry a hero? What kind of hero was that mysterious cloud spirit sect Han Nishui? If you marry him, you will be a perfect match. What is so good about that Zhong Shou? Is it worth it for you to be like this? One was in the sky while the other was on the ground. One is a bright and flawless white jade, the other is mud stepped on by others. Iren, you would rather be dragged into the mud by him than be protected by others? How did I, Lisina, raise such a dumb daughter? Xianyuan Iren smiled and didn't say anything. In terms of a hero, maybe he couldn't be considered one. However, in terms of sword techniques, who knows how many people of the same generation could compete with him? She couldn't help but think back to 3 months ago, that sword that was so sharp that even Hu Qianqiu didn't dare to take it head-on. Her heart started to move and her heartbeat quickened. However, she didn't feel shy. In this world, which girl didn't think about love? She did think about him, so there was nothing bad about that. The middle-aged lady was slightly shocked, and she was furious. She stomped her feet. My little Iren, even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for your family. That whirlpool in Gantian Mountain, once you are sucked in, even your father will be smashed to pieces. Do you know that if you marry Han Nishui, our Xian Mountain City will have the support of Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect and Pill Fountain Sect? Even if your father takes down Gantian Mountain, it wouldn't be a problem? This is also for your life. Your senior brother said that the chances of you dying halfway with the Mysterious Moon Wood Brilliance method are too high, and we need the help of Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect's spiritual pills. If anything happens to you, what should I do? Daughter, you always talk about righteousness and benevolence, but do you know filial piety is within it? Only then did Xianyuan Iren's expression change slightly. She turned around. Mother? If father heard your words, he wouldn't be happy. With father's personality, he definitely wouldn't rely on his daughter to build up his empire. You don't need to worry about my cultivation method. I have my own ways to solve it. Recently I have some ideas. As for filial piety, in my eyes, Not letting my parents walk further and further down the wrong path is the true filial piety. On the contrary, mother, your body is fine, but you want to act sick to trick me back. Is there a point? Also, that Gantian mountain city definitely belongs to Zhongsho. He doesn't need father's help, and he doesn't need to rely on external help. As for my fiancé, he's not someone who can be trampled on like mud. Mother, I'm unhappy that you said that about him. I want to say that he is mud. Trash. Scum. An idiot who is about to die. Trash. You brat, you really want to go against the heavens? The middle-aged woman suddenly scolded out, venting her anger. Although Xianyuan Iren's brows were slightly furrowed, she was really casual as she looked into the distance. She couldn't help but feel furious, like she had punched the air, making her feel stuffy. Following which she took in a deep breath, forcing her emotions to calm down. She laughed coldly. That Gantian mountain city definitely belongs to Zhongsho? I think you are bewitched. Does that Gantian mountain prince have any ability at all? After losing his position as the prince and monster king, he is nothing. If he isn't mud, then what is he? Xianyuan Iren shook her head, too lazy to speak anymore. At the start, they set a 5-month date for Zhongsho to personally come to Xian Mountain City to meet her father. Speaking of which, there weren't many days left. Regarding her marriage, her mother didn't have the final say. Her senior brother also didn't have the final say. Only her father could decide. The middle-aged woman couldn't help but feel helpless, scoffing coldly. I am too lazy to persuade you. Your marriage with that Zhongsho, even if your father agrees, I won't agree. You'd better stay here for the next few months. Unless you think it through, you are not allowed to go out. After saying this, the middle-aged woman waved her sleeves and left in a huff. The maidservants behind her hurriedly followed. In the blink of an eye, only the two of them were left on the 9-story building. Xianyuan Iren heaved a sigh of relief, helplessness flashing across her eyes. When she turned around, her expression was ice-cold, like it could freeze one. She looked emotionlessly at Li Yunyang, who was standing behind her. What are you still doing here? Aren't you going to follow my mother? Li Yunyang's body trembled, 2 streams of tears dripping down from her eyes. Little miss, why don't you listen to your mother? Although that Zhongsho is talented, that Han Nishui might not be weaker than him. He also has the mysterious cloud spirit sect to rely on. Little Miss's cultivation method has problems, and you need that mysterious chill ancient pill. Xianyuan Iren broke out into a laugh. Didn't I tell you before that even if I fall, I won't do anything against my heart? At this moment, I won't. Also, don't call me Little Miss anymore. There is no relationship between you and me. Li Yunyang's breathing stopped, her expression filled with sadness. Xianyuan Iren shifted her gaze. I am only curious. Zhongsho killing Li Yaling and defeating Hu Qianqiu, why aren't you willing to tell anyone about it? I know that he has worries and doesn't want to make it too public. What is the reason for you? It isn't that I'm not willing. Li Yunyang raised her head and bit her lips. I don't dare to say it. Don't dare to say it? Xianyuan Iren was startled, following which her eyes lit up. You don't want my father to know and change his mind? I understand. Li Yunyang's face was ashen white. She didn't agree or deny it. How was it as simple as Little Miss said? The reason why she didn't dare to say it was because of another reason. Even till now, she still didn't understand what was going on around her. Who was the person who could threaten her life and make her keep her mouth shut? North of the Water Fairy Lake, roughly 2,000 miles away, within an unknown canyon, 2 silhouettes were sitting on top of a mountain peak 100 miles away, looking rather disheveled. Yen Fan's shoulder was totally dyed red. The front of Xianyuan Iren's body also had several light sword wounds. At this moment, the valley that was less than 100 miles wide was destroyed beyond recognition. Countless sword scars and countless holes were scattered all over the place. The strong force from before had crushed and killed all the living beings in the area. Yen Fan looked at his wound and casually waved his hand, causing a streak of sword energy to spread out. His muscles trembled and the sword wound automatically healed. The water fairy's swords are getting more and more cunning and ruthless each time. Slightly praising, Yen Fan's face faintly showed some regret. During these few days I feel a little regretful. Restricting 90% of my true strength and not being able to use the Pinnacle Mountain sword. If this continues a few more times, I won't be your opponent. Shui Lingbo's brows rose up, a cold disdain apparent on her face. Didn't I also restrict 85% of my strength? I also didn't use my lightning technique. You have studied sword techniques for hundreds of years, and now you come to bully a junior like me. Aren't you embarrassed to say all this? If you aren't willing, then we can go all out and fight. Fighting with my hands and feet tied like this is so boring and unsatisfying. Yen Fan laughed and didn't dare to retort, only revealing a serious expression. Speaking of which, it has been close to 3 months. Today's Zhong Shou should be close to the Xiantian level. Who knows what his current situation is like? Has he touched the barriers of heaven? This threshold isn't something that can be easily crossed. Chapter 165. Barriers from Heaven? Shui Lingbo's attention shifted slightly, her brows furrowed. This matter is indeed tough to deal with since the Cloud Desolate era. Since the Cloud era, only 5 people were able to break through the barriers from heaven, and they all relied on external strength. Apart from that, there is also the dual meridian body and broken soul, making it even more complicated and problematic. Luckily Zhong Shou has grasped sword intent, and it isn't impossible. My sect has a unique treasure, the counterfeit body pearl, which can be of help to him. How is your Wujua Villa prepared to deal with him? Body fake pearl? Yen Fan laughed, hearing the provocation in Shui Lingbo's words. He said expressionlessly, although our Wujua Villa isn't as rich as your Taiyuan sect, we can help you. In this aspect, we can help him, and the effect might be above that of the body fake pearl. Fairy, have you heard of something like a spirit vein? Seeing the 16-year-old girl's body tremble, he couldn't help but reveal shock in his eyes. Even with Yen Fan's upbringing, he couldn't help but feel delighted, lightly stroking his beard. Actually, I am more curious about what that Zhong Shou is doing in the water fairy lake. Every day he goes to the center of the lake. Isn't he afraid that the chill serpent will eat him? Just based on that chill serpent it dares? Shui Lingbo curled her lips in disdain. If you want to know, why don't you just go over and take a look? You don't dare to go over, so why are you dragging me here? A few days ago, I used the heaven-looking technique to see, and I only know that Zhong Shou is in a black pond. However, in just a moment that chill serpent blocked it. Actually, if we work together, why do we need to fear it? We can't go. Yen Fan shook his head, his expression solemn. He is accumulating strength to go through the tribulation and is at his most wary moment. If we go over, we can't avoid a huge battle. It isn't that Yen Fan is underestimating me, but that chill serpent is amazing. Half a step dragon body, even if we work together, we won't be its opponent. Once the battle starts, it will affect thousands of miles of land. However, if you want to go your own way, I won't stop you. You can just go over. Anyways, I, Yen Fan, won't get involved in this mess. As expected, Shui Lingbo hesitated for a moment before she snorted and said, If you don't want to go, then don't go. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Why did this Zhong Shou have to go to the water fairy lake of all places? After complaining to Zhong Shou for a while, Shui Lingbo stopped talking. His eyes wandered around, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yen Fan also sighed. If they continued to delay, they would be delaying Zhong Shou's future. Regardless of whether it was a martial cultivator or a spirit master, cultivation was a race against time. Sometimes, if one was a moment slower, one could be delayed for a lifetime. The younger they were, the more chances they had to climb to the peak of the martial path and spiritual spells. Tidying up his emotions, Yen Fan looked at Lei Dong, who was not far away and holding his knife. He couldn't help but smile. "Why don't you feel bored now?" Lei Dong's thick eyebrows twitched as he unhappily collected his thoughts. "If you guys can continue fighting like this every day, I will not be bored for the rest of my life. However, in these 10 days, you guys have only fought once." Yen Fan laughed out loud, his eyes showing a weird expression. "Then I'll find something interesting for you. How about you help me do something? It can be considered as helping your sworn brother." Lei Dong scoffed and subconsciously wanted to reject. Following which, Yen Fan took out a book from his sleeves and waved it in front of his eyes. Lei Dong was startled and instantly turned into a flattering expression. He patted his chest and said proudly, "Look at what uncle is saying. Lei Dong is your nephew, so it is natural for me to do things for you." When Yen Fan saw the situation, he laughed and didn't comment. Shui Lingbo looked on coldly. A blue talisman suddenly flashed in her eyes, her gaze crossing hundreds of miles of space. She looked near the water fairy lake. On a beach, 2 black figures were standing by the lake. One of them had a handsome appearance, but his entire body was hidden in a black robe. The other one had an extremely ugly appearance. Within the black pond, the originally calm water surface was spinning and stirring. Suddenly it was spinning forward, suddenly it was spinning in the opposite direction. Its strength was also changing, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. It caused numerous waves and splashed all around. Zhong Shou stood 2,000 feet below the water. Around him was a huge whirlpool that was crazily spinning. However, at this moment, no matter how fast his chaotic splitting wind fist was, no matter how strong it was unable to do anything. It was unable to make the whirlpool any faster. His body was at the center of the underwater storm and didn't feel much pressure. The centrifugal suction force was also unable to affect his body. His internal organs hadn't been trained to the point that they were like steel. His marrow, blood, bones, flesh, skin, and tendons were just a little stronger than a peak grade 3 beast. However, being in the whirlpool, he didn't feel anything at all. Zhong Shou only trained for a short while and knew that it would be hard for him to improve. However, he still punched out with all his strength. The vast and hot fist energy passed through close to 30 feet of water and struck the stone wall opposite. In that direction, a large piece of green stone was smashed into pieces. The water within the pond also shook intensely, like it was about to collapse. Zhong Shou didn't care, still standing on that giant stone. Closing his eyes, he silently felt the chakra in his body as well as the changes in his limbs and bones. After that day, he purposely delayed for a few more days. 10 days of tough training caused the energy in his body to become even more vast and abundant. 23,000 kilograms of strength. I have reached the limit and can try for Xiantian. Although his strength was only trained to this amount, it was still a distance away from Xiantian. It was only twice that of a peak mythic master. However, his body quality was 5 times that of a normal martial master, or even stronger. Only because the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy he could use was limited, which was why his strength couldn't explosively increase. He could feel that the energy in his chakra couldn't be suppressed anymore and was about to move. Zhong Shou made a prompt decision. With a thought, he led the vast energy meridians down his leg. Out of the 480 body chakra acupoints, during these 3 months, he had opened up a total of 500 energy acupoints. Threads of true qi seeped out and entered his energy ocean. When the hundreds of energy meridians gathered together, it was like a tidal wave. Immediately, it surged like a surging wave and was difficult to control. It split into 2 and pierced towards his lower body. It was like a hot knife through butter. Only when it reached the 2 Earth Gate acupoints was it blocked by an extremely thick barrier. If it was a normal person, this energy, which was several times that of a normal martial master, could easily crush them. However, at this moment it was like it had hit a steel plate. After blocking it, it surged back. Barriers from heaven? Samuraim's eyes opened slightly, revealing a cold smile. In this life, the barrier of his Earth Gate acupoints was only similar to the one in his last life. After accumulating for 3 months, how can it be stopped by such a small barrier? Using energy as a sword, break. In Zhongsho's body, all the true qi that surged to his legs turned into an extremely sharp, blurry and hard to predict sword shape as it slashed down once more. It wasn't formed from the 18 cloud shocking god-destroying sword intent spiritual seeds within his dantian. Instead, it was a sword that was as strong as a dragon, as nimble as water, as thick as a mountain, changing like the clouds. It was also overbearing, like it contained everything. In that instance, numerous small wounds appeared on Zhongsho's legs. The sword intent and sword energy that spread out caused his lower body to be covered in wounds. However, the 2 Earth Gate acupoints that were blocked by 2 sword-shaped energies suddenly slashed into them. Originally, it couldn't be blocked, but when this sword attack was about to smash the last obstacle into pieces, near the 2 acupoints, threads of spiritual light seeped out, forming a talisman that blocked the sword energy from slashing out. Why is it this thing again? In the last life, it had it. Why did it change to this body in this life? Or is it because of this point-sealing talisman? Moreover, it is even more vicious. A lightning glow appeared in Samuraim's eyes. In the last life, he was poisoned by a talisman because of this. In this life, who knows which day wandering spirit master did this Zhongsho offend? To think that he wasn't arrogant or rash these few months and didn't do anything rash. Scoffing coldly, within Zhongsho's dantian, the 18 cloud shocking god-destroying sword intents charged down and merged into the 2 sword energies. His sword could contain hundreds of schools and all living things. Just a cloud-shocking god-destroying sword could also merge into it. In the last life, since I wasn't stopped by this talisman, in this life, why would I be stopped by this talisman? Xiantian realm, open for me. The 2 sword attacks of the Earth Gate instantly swelled, shining with a sharp glow, causing numerous cracks to appear on the talisman. Only to hear a sizzling sound as more blood seeped out from Zhongsho's calf. Zhongsho didn't care. His eyes were still calm and expressionless. In the next instance there was a loud explosion. That layer of obstruction was finally broken open. 2 sword-shaped energies instantly pierced through the body and struck down. The first to suffer was the stone platform. It was sliced by the sword energy and directly shattered into pieces. It pierced 100 feet into the bottom of the lake, stirring up a bunch of sand and gravel that rolled about. The water of the lake boiled and surged once more. There wasn't a whirlpool, but on the surface of the water, there were already 200 feet high wave. The heaven and earth spiritual energy around this place was continuously shaking, spreading out for several miles. Time flowed, who knows how much time had passed. Only then did the heaven and earth spiritual energy become thin. The black lake slowly calmed down. Zhongsho opened his eyes in the water, his body suddenly charging up and jumping out of the lake. At this moment, the feeling was totally different. The increase in spiritual senses, the feeling of touching the heaven and earth spiritual energy. It was far from the feeling of using the external pill to reach Xiantian. The vital energy in his body surged like he had endless strength. I have finally reached the Xiantian realm. Zhongsho took in a deep breath, suppressing the emotions in his heart. To a martial artist who chased after the peak of the martial path, the Xiantian realm was just the beginning. There was still a long way to go from the peak of the ascended realm that he had reached in his last life. Moreover, each step was difficult. 9 steps, each step required one to go all out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.